Chapter 45:13. Jiyu Jinglian glared at him coldly. Yo-Yo, on the other hand, was not afraid of the tiger. He glared back fiercely. Come on, let's decide the winner in one round. I'm not playing with you. You're guilty. You're scared. Get your father to play with me. My father needs to go to work. He needs to work. Who would be like you? Jiyu Jinglian was so angry that his face turned ashen. He had actually been bullied by Yo-Yo, this little bee asterisk starred. Moreover, he had been ridiculed to the point where he could not retaliate. Yun Shusha quickly came over to smooth things over. Yo-Yo, don't mess around. I'm not messing around. You're not allowed to provoke Uncle Jiyu. Okay. Yo-Yo listened obediently, but secretly gave Jiyu Jinglian a thumbs up. When Jiyu Jinglian saw this, he gritted his teeth even harder. He turned around and looked at Yun Shusha. Where's Muyaja? He asked. He's at the office. What's he doing at the office? He's at work. Come here. Jiyu Jinglian was obviously serious. Tell him that his son provoked me. Why did it feel like Jiyu Jinglian was complaining? Half an hour later, Muyaja arrived. He had originally planned to rush over after dealing with the company's affairs. Although only one guardian could enter the quarantine area, his 3 children were in the hospital and he was worried about being alone at home. Just then, Jiyu Jinglian called and said that there was something urgent. He thought that something earth-shattering had happened and hurried over. However, when he entered the ward, he saw Jiyu Jinglian sitting at the table with a deck of poker cards in front of him. Muyaja was stunned. What was going on? When Yo-Yo saw him, she immediately ran over and said to him, Daddy, Jiyu Jinglian wants to play blackjack with you. You have to work harder. You can't lose, okay? His son's skills were not as good as mine, so he lost to me. I asked him to play with me, but he said that he would not lower himself to the same level as a child, and that it would only count if he played with you. Muyaja looked at Jiyu Jinglian speechlessly. Are you a child? So childish. Jiyu Jinglian raised his eyebrows. Sit. Muyaja sat down in front of the table. Jiyu Jinglian immediately dealt the cards, 1 open card and 2 hidden cards. 1 round to decide the winner. Wait. Muyaja frowned. You want to play blackjack with me? What is it? I won't. Muyaja said, I rarely play cards. Jiyu Jinglian said. Your son knows how to play blackjack, and you're telling me you don't. Who are you lying to? Muyaja said innocently, I really don't know how to play. Do you think I'm you? Jiyu Jinglian was speechless. He deeply suspected that Muyaja was pretending to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. How could he not have come into contact with blackjack? Then what do you know? Muyaja said, if it's 2 people, I'll play catfishing. Catfishing? Yo-Yo leaned over curiously. Daddy, you really don't know how to play? Muyaja lowered his voice. I've played before, but I forgot the rules. You're such a scammer. Who would be happy to play blackjack with him? Who is he? He grew up in the casino. You can't afford to offend him. The president of Shengyu Financial Group was actually scared. Yo-Yo despised him. Daddy, you're such a coward. Muyaja didn't think much of it. So be it. Daddy doesn't earn money to gamble. It's to support the 3 of you. These words were very pleasing to Yo-Yo's ears. Why was his daddy so virtuous? Chapter 45:14. Jiyu Jinglian snorted coldly. Are you a sore loser? That depends on what you're betting on. Muyaja suddenly leaned closer and said meaningfully, if you want to bet, why don't you bet on something big? I'm quite interested in the Jiyu family mansion. Why don't you use the Jiyu family mansion as your capital? Jiyu Jinglian's gaze sharpened. This Muyaja was quite good at speaking without thinking. The Jiyu family mansion? Every inch of that land was worth a fortune. It had been preserved for hundreds of years, and every brick was worth a fortune. Even the Cultural Relics Bureau had estimated the price of the carvings on the eaves. This piece of land was worth half of the Jiyu Corporation's shares. It was a mansion that was more expensive than a courtyard house in the capital. Why? You can't bear to part with it. Are you feeling guilty? Muyaja mocked expressionlessly, it seems that President Gu is not so sure about winning. His provocation was only because he had set his sights on the Gu family's main residence. If Gu Jinglian was willing to take out the Gu family's residence as a bet, Mu Yaja would really be willing to follow the bet and give it his all. Get lost. Ha. Yun Shusha was speechless. Why are the two of you acting like children? So childish. Mu Yaja complained to his wife innocently, Madam, he provoked me first. Even in front of Gu Jinglian, Mu Yaja showed his true colors of a henpecked husband. Gu Jinglian said coldly, it seems that President Mu is also a henpecked husband. He's usually swift and decisive in business, but in private, he's actually so afraid of his wife. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows and glanced at him. Oh, so you're saying that President Gu has a high status in the family? Gu Jinglian's lips twitched and he said indignantly, I have the highest status in the family. Dad, you're lying. Xiao Bao, who was at the side, mercilessly exposed a certain someone. At home, Daddy clearly listens to Mommy. Pooh ha 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 ha. The group of kids fell on the bed laughing. Gu Jinglian's face could not be any darker. Yo-Yo teased Gu Jinglian even more. Oh my god. Gu Jinglian, the dignified Gu Jinglian, has actually become a slave to his wife. I also heard that Auntie Chu Ho's status in the Gu family seems to be higher. Of course. Xiao Bao said proudly, no matter how big or small the family is, Mom makes more decisions. Dad wanted to fight for his position at first, but he failed in the end. Gu Jinglian couldn't take it anymore and punched him mercilessly. Sometimes, she really wanted to slap Xiao Bao to the wall, the kind that couldn't be pulled down. How could he trick his own father like that? Ever since he was young, he didn't have any other skills, but his ability to tear him down was not small. Xiao Bao hid behind Yun Shusha and pointed at Gu Jinglian as he complained, Dad, you're using domestic violence. I'm going to become an idiot because of you. It's best if you become an idiot. Dad will take care of you for the rest of your life. It was better to be an idiot than to have such a ridiculous setting. Yun Shusha tried so hard to hold back her laughter that her stomach hurt. However, she really couldn't tell that Gu Jinglian had such a low status in the family. This didn't seem like his style of doing things. Beside them, Jingyang said quietly, why do I feel that our ward is different from the other wards? The group looked at him and asked, what do you mean? This morning, I heard someone crying in the ward next door. I feel that many wards in the quarantine area are lifeless, but our ward is a little special. Chapter 45:15. Rather than saying that it was special, it was more like the flu wasn't a big deal at all. This was a flu that could kill people. When Jingqi found out that he was going to enter the quarantine zone, she hugged Jingyang and cried once. After arriving at the quarantine zone, Jingyang was originally depressed. However, when he met Yo-Yo and Xiao Ichen, this pair of clowns, he couldn't be depressed even if he wanted to. Xiao Ichen lay on the hospital bed in a daze and said disapprovingly, what's the big deal about a flu virus? I've seen all kinds of things and I've gone through life and death with Yo-Yo several times. It's just a flu virus. Everyone looked at him. However, Xiao Ichen's retribution soon came. The next day, Xiao Ichen's condition took a turn for the worse. His high fever didn't subside. He had a strong constitution since he was young and rarely fell sick. However, his fever suddenly rose to 39.8 degrees Celsius. Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja only went back at night. When they came back the next day, Xiao Ichen was lying limply on the bed and couldn't move at all. He had paid the price for his big words yesterday. For some reason, Yo-Yo looked at Xiao Ichen, who was lying limply on the bed with his eyes half closed and a thermometer in his mouth. It was clearly a very serious matter, but she felt like laughing. Did Xiao Ichen's words yesterday count as setting a flag? In the morning, the news broadcast on the television reported a few cases of illness. There was a death in the hospital affiliated to Southwest University of China. Furthermore, the flu virus this time had already spread around the world. The World Health Organization had already named the flu virus shaman. According to research, it should have originated from a person who ate sick pork that died from the coronavirus and had a high fever that didn't subside, leading to pneumonia. The virus was spread through the air. However, The virus had to pass through many levels of immune protection in the body. Adult immunity was stronger, but children's immunity was weaker. Therefore, the flu this time was more common among children. The flu virus would stay in the body for a period of time. Simply put, if the person didn't survive the high fever and subsequently developed pneumonia, it would be fatal. If they survived the fever and didn't have any major problems after a period of observation, they would have a preliminary immunity to the virus and would not be infected again. However, Xiao Chen's sudden collapse caught everyone off guard. Xiao Chen had a good physique. Mu Yaja had said that he rarely fell sick when he was young and rarely caught a cold. He had been in good health since he was young. No one had expected him to fall sick all of a sudden. The doctor explained that whether it was a child or an adult, it was not a good thing to be sick often or not. They often fell sick because their bodies were weak, but if they didn't fall sick for a long time, the body's antibodies would become less and less. When a serious illness came, it would be difficult to resist. This was because the body would produce antibodies to the virus after recovering from the illness. The next time the illness occurred, it wouldn't be so serious. If the body had minor illnesses frequently, the body would produce more antibodies, and the ability to resist the disease would be strengthened. Catching a cold was a detoxification process. Xiao Chen rarely fell sick. Therefore, when the flu came aggressively, his body lacked the antibodies to resist it, and he collapsed immediately. Other than him, Yu Yaro and Jing Yang's conditions improved a lot. Xiao Bao and Yo Yo were still in the same condition. They were neither good nor bad. The doctor said that Xiao Chen's condition was more serious. If his high fever didn't subside, it would lead to viral pneumonia, and his life would be in danger. Chapter 45:16. Yun Shusha was scared out of her wits and stayed by Xiao Chen's bedside. Yueyao's heart ached for her brother as well. She recalled how Xiao Chen and Yo Yo had fought over the tangerines she had peeled a few days ago. In the end, she had given the tangerines to Jing Yang. She had peeled 2 tangerines and wanted to give them to Xiao Chen. Although she was still young, she could vaguely understand the doctor's words. When she found out that Xiao Chen's condition was not optimistic, she was naturally unhappy. Jing Yang's heart ached when he saw this. He accompanied Yu Yaro to stay by Xiao Chen's bedside. Xiao Chen had just woken up from his 4 drip and saw a group of people surrounding his bedside. His eyes widened in shock, and he almost cried out in fright. Yun Shusha saw that he was crying and was extremely nervous. She hurriedly asked what was going on. In the end, Xiao Chen said something that shocked everyone and made them not know whether to laugh or cry. "Am I dying? What do you mean? Did the doctor say that I can't be saved?" Xiao Chen rubbed his eyes and cried pitifully. "Why are all of you surrounding me? It's as if you're looking at me for the last time." Pooh. Yun Shusha hurriedly spat a few times. "What nonsense are you talking about? What do you mean you can't be saved? What do you mean you can't be saved? Everyone is just worried about you and wants to take care of you." Xiao Chen's eyes were still red. "I thought my condition had worsened and they wanted me to leave a will." Pooh. Yo-Yo spat heavily. "If you keep spouting nonsense, I'll beat you up. Xiao Chen, be good. As long as you get through the fever and don't contract pneumonia, you'll be fine." Xiao Chen nodded. Yun Shusha hurriedly scooped out a bowl of porridge that she had just cooked. "Here, have some porridge. Eat more nutrients to increase your immune system." "Yes." Xiao Chen didn't like porridge, but he couldn't eat anything right now. Because of the fever, he had no appetite at all. Not only that, he felt that he was about to become muddle-headed from the fever. His head was extremely heavy. He rarely had a fever, so he had experienced the pain of a high fever. His head hurt, and his eyes hurt. It was so painful that his eyeballs felt like they were about to pop out. Because he was constantly blowing and wiping his nose, it was as if a layer of skin was being rubbed off from his nose. Yun Shusha patiently fed him a bowl of porridge. In the end, Xiao Chen woke up from his afternoon nap and felt his stomach churn. He threw himself into the trash can beside the bed and vomited. The porridge that he had eaten in the morning was all vomited out in the afternoon. After vomiting, he collapsed onto the bed as if he had lost all his strength. His stomach acid churned, and he felt so uncomfortable that tears fell from his eyes. Yun Shusha's heart ached as she watched from the side. When had Xiao Chen ever suffered like this? She couldn't help but recall Yo-Yo's childhood. She had also suffered like this in the hospital. She wished that she could take Xiao Chen's place and suffer like this. Because Xiao Chen had collapsed, the atmosphere in the ward became much heavier. The entire quarantine zone fell into a gloomy atmosphere. Everyone was on tenterhooks, afraid that they would be the first patient to die in the quarantine zone of the hospital. Outside the ward, the doctors and nurses were wearing protective clothing as they paced back and forth. At such a time, such a scene was inexplicably terrifying. Xiao Chen didn't allow Yu Yaro to lie beside his bed because he was worried that she would pass the flu to her. Chapter 45:17. Yun Shusha also felt sorry for Xiao Chen, but she was also worried that Yu Yaro would be worried about her brother. Therefore, she asked her to wear a thicker mask. Xiao Chen was on an 4-drip for 2 consecutive days, and his condition kept fluctuating. One moment, his temperature would drop to 37 degrees, and at night, it would reach nearly 40 degrees. His entire body would be hot, and in the end, he would become delirious. Yun Shusha had not slept well for a few days. Mu Yaja felt sorry for her and suggested that she go home to get some sleep. She was unwilling, but in the end, Mu Yaja forced her to go home. She had not slept for a few days. Staying up all night would also affect her immune system. In addition, Yun Shusha had a delicate and weak body, so Mu Yaja was still worried. After Yun Shusha went home, he was responsible for taking care of the 3 little guys. In the past, Mu Yaja would definitely not be able to take care of himself. The 3 little guys would definitely make a mess. However, ever since Yun Shusha was pregnant with Yu Yaro, he had to take care of everything from the pregnancy to the delivery, to the confinement and breastfeeding period. Who was born to do housework and take care of babies? Wasn't it all acquired through training? When Yu Yaro grew up, Mu Yaja also had the ability to take care of babies. When he took care of babies, he was not inferior to a top nanny. However, on the other hand, Chu Ho had to take care of the 2 little guys. They had just been weaned, and their immune system was too weak. If she went to the hospital too often, she would have to be isolated from the 2 little guys. Therefore, the heavy responsibility of taking care of Xiao Bao fell on Jiyu Jinglian's shoulders. However, Jiyu Jinglian had always been taken care of. When did he have the experience of taking care of others? When Chu Ho was in confinement, he volunteered to take care of his wife during her confinement, but in the end, he took care of her in a mess. In the end, he was chased away by Chu Ho. Xiao Bao was hospitalized, and Uncle Fu was old. If it were anyone else, they would be worried as well. Moreover, Xiao Bao also said that he wanted Jiyu Jinglian to accompany him. Naturally, Jiyu Jinglian could only do it himself. In the end, Xiao Bao regretted it a few days later. How did Jiyu Jinglian clean his face? Just like wiping a table, she covered Xiao Bao's face with the face towel like a rag. Then, like kneading dough twists, she rubbed his face until it was red. Jiyu Jinglian believed that since her face was red, she must have scrubbed it clean. Every time he finished scrubbing his face, Xiao Bao's face would turn red as if he was drunk. It was as if a layer of his skin had been peeled off. Jiyu Jinglian felt a sense of accomplishment. Xiao Bao then looked to the side and saw how Mu Yaja was gently wiping Xiao Chen's face and hands. He was so jealous that he was speechless. He patted the blanket and shouted at Jiyu Jinglian's back view indignantly, "Dad, what's the use of being handsome? You don't know how to cook or wash clothes. You can't even take care of a patient well. Can your handsome face be used as food?" Jiyu Jinglian turned around gloomily. He was about to flare up, but since Xiao Bao said that he was handsome, he was satisfied. Xiao Chen was not convinced when he heard this. He supported his weak body to sit up and said indignantly, "Is your dad handsome? He's not as handsome as my dad. My dad is the most handsome in the world. He's the richest and the most gentle. Can your dad compare to him?" Chapter 45:18. Mu Yaja's eyelids twitched fiercely. It was understandable for children to brag and compete. But when did violence become a category of comparison? TSK, TSK, TSK. My daddy won't compete with you in violence. Xiaochen gave him a thumbs up. My daddy is rich. My daddy has a lot of money. He can build a few Eiffel Towers for me to climb with his money. Mu Yaja almost vomited blood. He was secretly calculating if he could really build a few Eiffel Towers with his wealth. While he was still calculating, the two little guys had already started bragging. My daddy can cook Chinese food, Western food, pasta, instant noodles, and pizza. My father knows how to write song calligraphy in regular script and seal script. Every piece of calligraphy is priceless. Our family lives in a big villa. Our family has a big courtyard. My daddy's Shengyu Financial Group can buy your GU Corporation. My daddy can buy Shengyu if he sells the GU mansion. Huff, 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 huff. The two little guys were panting after 300 rounds of verbal sparring. Yo-Yo suddenly walked gracefully in front of Xiaochen and said calmly, "Xiaochen, open your mouth." "Ah. What?" As soon as Xiaochen opened his mouth, Yo-Yo immediately stuck the thermometer into his mouth. Xiaochen frowned, held the thermometer in his mouth, and glared at Yo-Yo. Wow, it's finally quiet. Yo-Yo took a deep breath and suddenly felt that the world had become beautiful. Ha 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 ha. Who told you to show off? Now you can't say anything, right? While Xiao Bao was feeling smug, Jiyu Jinglian's tall figure had already approached. Before he could react, the big devil pinched his cheek and stuffed the thermometer into his mouth. This time, the two little guys were as quiet as chickens and stared at each other. However, even so, neither of them was convinced. They crossed their arms and glared at each other with resentment. 5 minutes later, Yo-Yo took out the thermometer and looked at the temperature. His brows furrowed. TSK Mu Yaja came over sternly. "How is it?" "The temperature has risen again." Yo-Yo showed the thermometer to Mu Yaja. 39.5 degrees. High fevers are recurring. This situation is not optimistic. Jiyu Jinglian started to worry as well. Although they usually bickered, he was still worried about little Ichen's condition at critical moments. "Should we call the doctor?" The doctor came this morning and prescribed some medicine and drips, but his condition is still not improving. If this situation continues, little Ichen will be sent to the quarantine zone. The complete isolation zone was the severe isolation zone. That meant that his life could be in danger. Usually, a patient would be in a room in such an isolated area and no one would have the right to visit them. Xiao Ichen was also worried. He lay on the hospital bed and looked listless. Is the fever coming on again? The fever had already subsided this morning. Will I never recover? Try saying that again, Yo-Yo and Mu Yaja said in unison. Xiao Ichen kept quiet. Xiao Bao couldn't bear to see him like this. "All right, I won't argue with you anymore. It won't be too late to argue with me when you're fully recovered. Now, get some rest." Chapter 45:19. Xiao Ichen glanced at him resentfully from the corner of his eyes. "That's why you should keep a distance from me. Don't get infected by me when the time comes. What's there to be afraid of? I'm not afraid of getting sick." Jiyu Jinglian suddenly became nervous and gave him a knock on the head. "Don't raise a flag." Xiao Bao tilted his head. "Dad, what's a flag?" Jiyu Jinglian pinched his son's cheeks in disappointment. Although he was angry at him, his heart ached for him even more. These words were just like how a general would say to his beloved female lead in a TV series, "When I come back victorious, I'll marry you." It was as scary as that. However, Jiyu Jinglian's worries came true very quickly. The next day, Jiyu Jinglian woke up after a night of watching over Xiao Bao. He had a high fever. The doctor did his rounds and checked on his condition. He said that Xiao Bao's condition had worsened just like Xiao Ichen's. Hence, he suggested that Xiao Ichen and Xiao Bao be quarantined. This would be considered a completely quarantined area. Jiyu Jinglian's heart sank when he heard this. He was still wondering if he had not taken good care of Xiao Bao and Xiao Bao's condition had worsened instead. Mu Yaja also could not bear to send Xiao Ichen to quarantined alone. After all, if they were quarantined alone, he would not have the right to visit them. Xiao Chen would definitely be lonely in the quarantined area alone. However, since the doctor had said so, Mu Yaja had no choice but to agree for Xiao Chen's sake. Jiyu Jinglian naturally agreed. He had even thought that Xiao Bao would recover soon and be discharged from the hospital. He did not expect Xiao Bao's condition to worsen as well. Chu Ho and Yun Shusha found out that they would be transferred to the quarantine area in the afternoon. Despite Mu Yaja and Jiyu Jinglian's attempts to stop them, they insisted on coming over to take a look. Both of them were worried sick. In the afternoon, Yun Shusha and Chu Ho rushed over one after another. Xiao Bao and Xiao Ichen's conditions had taken a turn for the worse. Whatever they ate, they would vomit it out after a while. Not only did they have a high fever, but their mental states were also worrying. Yu Yaro secretly hid in the bathroom and cried. Jing Yang accompanied her and couldn't bear it. Yo-Yo stayed by Xiao Ichen's bedside and held his hand tightly. Although he usually found this older brother annoying, Xiao Ichen was in a critical situation. No matter how strong he was, he couldn't help but cry. Even though he was seriously injured, he endured it and didn't cry. Facing the extremely weak Xiao Ichen, Yo-Yo couldn't hold back his tears anymore. He clenched his teeth and covered his face as he cried secretly. Xiao Ichen could only open his eyes and look at him. He didn't even have the strength to speak. He wanted to raise his head and hold Yo-Yo's hand to comfort him and tell him not to worry, but he didn't even have the strength to speak. Xiao Bao's condition wasn't any better. He was much more delicate than Xiao Ichen to begin with. Initially, he was still strong enough to endure the pain of his high fever. However, when he saw Chu Ho, he immediately broke down and sobbed sadly. "Mom, I feel terrible." He felt as if his entire body was on fire, but he was also extremely cold. He felt hot with the blanket wrapped around him, but without the blanket, he was so cold that he shivered. He didn't even have the strength to get out of bed. Chu Ho rushed over and hugged him tightly. She couldn't bear to part with him. She had secretly asked the doctor about Xiao Bao's condition, but the doctor couldn't be sure. Chapter 45:20. After all, no one was prepared for the sudden onset of the flu. What he meant was that Xiao Bao and Xiao Ichen were in a similar predicament. As for the other children, even though they were not suffering from any symptoms yet, they could not rule out the possibility that the flu virus was still in its incubation stage. Since it was an unknown flu, no one could determine the mortality rate, cure rate, and sequelae of the flu. All they could do was try their best to save the children and study them. Many hospitals in the capital had news of nurses and doctors collapsing. A few nurses' immune systems had deteriorated due to inadequate protection and working overtime. Unfortunately, they were infected. Apart from that, many doctors had been fighting on the front lines for a long time and fell ill from overwork. Some even died on the operating table. The constant news reports made the public anxious and immersed themselves in the fear of the flu. On the streets, in the shopping malls, and in schools, everyone was wearing a mask. Taking the temperature every morning had become a routine. The thermometers in the pharmacies were sold out. In the alleys of the city, everyone was on tenterhooks, afraid that they would fall victim to the flu virus. Even if they could not accept it, they had no choice but to accept it. Yun Shusha secretly cried in the bathroom for a long time. She wiped her tears and applied cold water to her face before walking out of the bathroom. She walked to Xiao Ichen's bedside and replaced Yo-Yo. Xiao Ichen gently held Yun Shusha's hand. He looked at the doctors and nurses who had surrounded the bed and asked nervously, "Mommy, am I going to be quarantined?" "Yeah." Yun Shusha squeezed his palm and choked back her sobs. "It's okay. It's just a small problem. Mommy will wait for you to get better, okay?" "Yeah, I think it's just a small problem too." Xiao Ichen blinked and said disapprovingly, "I'm in good health. How can I be defeated by such a small flu virus?" "Yeah." Yun Shusha nodded her head vigorously as though she was using Xiao Ichen's words to convince herself. Xiao Ichen couldn't bear to see her holding back her sadness. He pursed his lips and looked at the ceiling to hold back his tears. He was not afraid of getting sick, but he was afraid that Yun Shusha would be worried. She was so fragile. If she worried about him all the time, she would not be able to eat or sleep well. He must not show any signs of weakness, Otherwise she would be even more worried. Therefore, Xiao Chen pretended to be relaxed and said, "Mommy, when I leave the quarantine zone, I want to eat your black pepper steak. That will have to wait until you come out. For the sake of Mommy's black pepper steak, I have to work hard to get healthy." Xiao Chen said confidently, "Don't worry, Mommy. I won't make you wait for too long." The doctor and nurse looked at each other and felt a little sad. The nurse walked over and said to Xiao Chen, "Little boy, say goodbye to your daddy and mommy, okay?" "I don't need to say goodbye." Xiao Chen's voice was a little choked up, but he still said stubbornly, "I'll be back soon." He and Xiao Bao were moved to a gurney and slowly pushed out of the ward. A group of people surrounded them as they walked towards the quarantine zone. 2 hospital beds were pushed to the quarantine zone door, one after the other. Xiao Bao's bed was pushed over to be next to Xiao Chen's. Chapter 45:21. Xiao Chen saw the fear and trepidation in Xiao Bao's eyes. He reached out his hand and said, "Come, hold my hand." Through the mask, Little Treasure winked mischievously at him and held his hand in the same way. Perhaps to Xiao Bao, the flu was just an ordinary cold. It wasn't that serious. However, Xiao Chen was deeply aware of what he and Xiao Bao were facing at the same time. It was a test of life. If they couldn't pass this test, they might not be able to survive. He heard from the doctor that although he had a good physique, he rarely fell sick since he was young. Because of this, his body produced very few antibodies. As a result, his illness came like a landslide. He didn't have many antibodies to defend against the flu virus. Hence, he collapsed. The 2 children were sent to the quarantine area. Yun Shusha was distracted all day and all night. She didn't know when Xiao Chen would be able to walk out of the coma. However, at the same time, there was good news. Yueyao's condition was slowly improving. If there were no accidents within a week, he should be able to be discharged. Yo-Yo had to be observed for a period of time. During this period of time, Yun Shusha was invited by the company to participate in a charity performance. It was a song that praised the angel in white. It was used to encourage the medical staff on the front line. At the same time, it was used to calm the panic of the public. Yun Shusha suppressed her worry and went to the sound engineer to record a demo. Xiao Chen and Xiao Bao were sent to the quarantine area. The ward suddenly quieted down. Jiyu Jinglian had been staying in the ward for the past few days. Xiao Bao wasn't around and Mu Yaja couldn't take care of Yu Yao and Yo-Yo on his own. Moreover, Jing Qi was also ill. Hence, Jiyu Jinglian helped to take care of Jing Yang. Jing Yang was especially afraid of Jiyu Jinglian. There was a type of person who, no matter how good-looking he was, had an irresistible aura that made people flinch at the sight of him. Jiyu Jinglian belonged to this type of person. No matter how calm and approachable he appeared, he couldn't hide his sharp aura at all. Every time Jiyu Jinglian wiped his face, Jing Yang would be as quiet as a puppet. He wouldn't move at all. Yo-Yo was speechless. Was Jiyu Jinglian that scary? Why was Jing Yang so afraid? For a few days, there was no news about Xiao Bao and Xiao Chen's condition. They didn't know if their conditions had improved or worsened. The man looked calm on the surface, but in reality, he was more worried than anyone else. Yu Yaro and Yo-Yo swore. Ichen uses. Yu said, "Actually, we seem to have neglected little Ichen. Even if he's my brother, he's not much older than me. He was only born an hour or 2 earlier than me, but he bears more responsibilities than anyone else." As the saying went, the crying child would get candy. However, Xiao Chen was too stingy with his tears. Perhaps Mu Yaja had given him a special education since he was young. When he was half an adult, he was thrown into a special training camp. He had developed a strong character. No matter how wronged he was, he wouldn't cry easily. In front of Yo-Yo, he also relied on his identity as Yo-Yo's elder brother. He took care of Yo-Yo just as much as Mu Yaja and Yun Shusha. He was very attentive. Chapter 45:22. In Yun Shusha's heart, a bowl of water was not full. In addition, Yo-Yo had always been weak, so she focused on Yo-Yo and ignored Xiao Chen's needs. Xiao Chen also rarely asked for any conditions because he felt that as an older brother, He should be more sensible and not act like a spoiled child. It was because he did not fight for anything, and did not even act like a spoiled child. This made it easier for people to overlook his desires. The more sensible a child was, the easier it was for people to forget that he was still a child. Xiao Chen was only a little over 10 years old. Like Yo-Yo, he also had times when his immune system was weak. At such a time, Xiao Chen still had a youthful sense of heroism. Yun Shusha was restless all day. Although Mu Yaja maintained his composure on the surface, only God knew how worried he was. Compared to them, Jiyu Jinglian was much calmer. Even though Chu Ho came to the hospital later and wanted to visit and was rejected, she was much calmer than Yun Shusha. Even though Xiao Bao was now in the quarantine area, which was equivalent to the intensive care unit, not just anyone could visit him. She also thought optimistically that being quarantined would only be temporary. Children who liked to smile would have good luck. Xiao Bao would definitely get better. It had to be said that emotions could be infectious. Chu Ho's strength and optimism also infected Yun Shusha. Yun Shusha finally pulled herself together. When Yun Shusha pulled herself together, Mu Yaja naturally calmed down a lot. However, it was impossible to say that she was not worried about Xiao Bao at all. Chu Ho refused to leave the hospital. The two little guys had already been entrusted to Uncle Fu's mother. She insisted on staying in the hospital and waiting for Xiao Bao to come out of the quarantine area. She usually helped Yun Shusha take care of the children. With her and Jiyu Jinglian around, the burden on Mu Yaja and Yun Shusha was much lighter. One time when they were free, Yun Shusha couldn't help but ask curiously, "Chu Ho, aren't you worried about Xiao Bao?" "Not worried. How could he not be worried? I will only be more worried than you. But you seem to be much calmer than me." When Chu Ho heard this, he smiled and said, "What else can I do? Am I supposed to panic and not choose a path? Xiao Bao is in the quarantine zone. He must miss me a lot. The only thing I can do every day is to call him and hear him tell me that he's safe. It was because I wanted to cheer him up that I had to be spirited. You know, emotions can be contagious. Only when I show confidence can I make him believe that his illness is just a minor illness and maintain a positive attitude." When Yun Shusha heard this, she nodded and said, "I also want to encourage Xiao Chen. However, it seems like I'm the one who needs more encouragement. A mother is strong. A mother is the child's biggest reliance. However, Shusha, you are already very strong. Don't worry, everything will be fine." Chu Ho patted her shoulder gently. Yun Shusha was already stronger than she had imagined. If her children were quarantined, she would not be able to be so calm. In fact, in the quarantine area, Xiao Chen's condition was not very good. He was originally the strongest one, but in the quarantine area, he was critically ill. Because of his high fever, he contracted viral pneumonia. Viral pneumonia could be understood as the late stage of influenza. Chapter 45-23. Xiao Chen also knew that his condition was getting worse. Every time he saw the medical staff enter the ward fully equipped to take care of him, give him injections and infusions, and put on more and more masks, he gradually understood that his condition was not as optimistic as he had imagined. However, he did not want Yun Shusha to worry. Even though he had a high fever and was dizzy, he still managed to stay awake and talk to her for more than 10 minutes. Once, after hanging up the phone, he fainted and was on the verge of going into shock due to exhaustion. In the end, the medical staff used a pacemaker to pull him back from the jaws of death. He did not dare to say anything about all this. "What? The flu is raging all over the world." Hua Jin held Alice's shoulder anxiously. "Is the flu virus serious this time?" "I spoke to Yun Shusha on the phone and she said that all the hospitals are overcrowded. Moreover, the customs all over the world are heavily guarded and it's very difficult to pass through. Even if one had a fever or a cold one day, they would be quarantined for observation." The whole world was in a state of high alert. This flu is very aggressive and has spread crazily all over the world. According to the researchers, the first case was a person who accidentally ate a piece of infected pork and went abroad for a vacation. This flu is the most contagious among children. Even adults with weak immune systems can't escape from it. Hua Jin said with lingering fear. At first, I thought it was just a common cold. Later, I heard that there were already deaths. Now, I heard that Xiao Chen's condition is very serious. Yu Yaro and Yo Yo are still quarantined in the hospital. I wonder how they are doing. Initially, when he found out that the 3 little guys were infected with the flu, he was in a hurry to go back. However, the customs clearance was very strict. Anyone with the slightest sign of a cold would be quarantined. Even those who seemed to be perfectly healthy had to go through health procedures. The global tourism industry was in a terrible downturn. Because of this flu, all the industries in the world were facing huge losses. So far, there have been hundreds of deaths around the world. Among them, there are many doctors who died in the line of duty. Hua Jin was a little restless. By the way, is there any news from Gongjie recently? Alice shook her head. Thanks to the flu, there's been no news from Gongjie. So far, we haven't gotten any news about him. He can't be trapped in another country's territory, right? It's not impossible. Alice was also worried. But don't worry too much. Do you think Gongjie might have accidentally contracted the flu? After all, the flu is raging all over the world now, and many people are infected without any precautions. How would I know? I'm not one of his immune cells. Alice narrowed her eyes and changed the topic. You seem to be very concerned about him. Aren't you worried? Alice replied truthfully. I'm worried. How could he not be worried? It was just that she wasn't as obvious as he was. Hua Jin disagreed. Isn't it normal to be worried? Alice said, don't worry. With Gongjie's physique, he'll definitely. Chapter 45-24. Alice widened her eyes in shock. What? Don't raise flags. Flag. What flags? What did he mean by that? Haven't you heard of it? In many television dramas, the general would say to his childhood sweetheart, when I'm done with this war, I'll come back and marry you. And then? Hua Jin looked gloomy. And then the general never came back. He died on the battlefield. Alice was speechless. Look, Shusha also said that with Xiao Chen's amazing physique, he won't fall sick easily. Look, his illness came like a landslide. He's completely quarantined now. Shusha can't even see him more than a few times now. Alice licked her lips awkwardly and started to fidget. Pooh. She hurriedly spat it out. Hua Jin slumped on the sofa. He wanted to go back to China, but he couldn't. He didn't know where Gongjie was. Although it was absolutely safe here, he couldn't go anywhere else. Anxiety. Anxiety. It was another torturous few days. There was good news from the hospital. The authoritative professor had already extracted the influenza virus DNA in the research lab and put it into the research of a vaccine. Everyone was looking forward to the development of a vaccine to cure this influenza virus as soon as possible. Chu Ho inquired about Xiao Bao's condition from the office. Compared to Xiao Chen, Xiao Bao's condition was gradually stabilizing. You should be on good terms with Mu Chen's parents, right? The doctor asked in a roundabout manner. Chu Ho nodded. She came to the office alone. Yun Shusha didn't come with her. Hence, the doctor told her everything. Compared to Xiao Bao, Mu Chen's condition doesn't seem to be as optimistic. A child with the same condition as him has unfortunately passed away this morning. Chu Ho's expression froze when she heard this. What do you mean by that? I want her to be mentally prepared, but I don't dare to say this in front of her. Chu Ho's gaze fell on the stack of files beside the doctor's hand. On top of it was a report on the donation of a body for medical research. In the age column, the person who wrote it was only 7 years old. This file should be from the child who passed away this morning from the flu that the doctor mentioned. Only 7 years old, he was still so young. He was about the same age as Xiao Bao. Chu Ho felt her heart ache just thinking about it. If she were in their shoes, she really couldn't imagine how the child's parents endured the pain and signed the agreement to donate the body. The doctor looked at the report and let out a long sigh. There were obvious traces of tears at the corner of his eyes. She was a very lovely girl. Before she died, she said that her wish was to eliminate this influenza. Her parents are university professors. After learning of their daughter's wish, they signed the donation agreement. Chu-ho clenched her fists. She calmed herself down and asked, then, Xiao-Chen, is his condition that serious too? The doctor replied truthfully, yes, it's much more serious than this. What? Xiao-Chen's condition was worse than this girl's? Then, wouldn't it be very dangerous? That was impossible. When he was video chatting with Yun Shusha, he clearly appeared to be very relaxed. Chapter 45-25. There were no signs at all. For some reason, Chu-ho's heart sank. Xiao Bao's condition had stabilized, but for some reason, because of Xiao-Chen, she couldn't feel happy or excited at all. She really liked Xiao-Chen. Back then, Jiyu Jinglian had also mentioned this child. In order to protect Lisa and Yo-Yo, Xiao-Chen had sacrificed an unimaginable amount of effort. Why was the illness so unfair to this sensible and obedient child? When Chu-ho returned to the ward, Yun Shusha had just finished washing the clothes. When she saw Chu-ho, she quickly went up to her and asked, Chu-ho, have you asked the doctor? How's Xiao Bao's condition? When Chu-ho saw her, she didn't know how to answer. She could only smile and say, the doctor said that Xiao Bao's condition has stabilized. Really? Yun Shusha's eyebrows relaxed happily. She was genuinely happy for her. That's great. Does this mean that if there are no accidents, Xiao Bao will be able to leave the quarantine area soon? Before the vaccine is developed, we can't be sure. If he hasn't fully recovered, he can't leave the quarantine area. Then, at least this means that Xiao Bao's condition is much better. Yun Shusha asked again, did the doctor say anything about Xiao-Chen's condition? Chu-ho was speechless. Her expression suddenly darkened. She was someone who couldn't hide her thoughts. When Xiao-Chen was mentioned, her expression turned ugly. When Yun Shusha saw this, she immediately guessed something. She asked tentatively, the doctor said that Xiao-Chen's condition isn't very optimistic, right? Yeah. What's the situation? Yun Shusha grabbed her hand and said, Chu-ho, tell me the truth. Shusha, I don't want to hide it from you. Xiao-Chen's condition is critical. His condition is more serious than you think. There's a little girl who just this morning. Her parents signed the agreement to donate her body. Xiao-Chen's condition is much worse than hers. Even the doctors are impressed. Perhaps it's because of his strong willpower that he's able to hold on until now. Before Chu-ho could finish his words, Yun Shusha's eyes widened and tears rolled down her cheeks. When Chu-ho saw this, he was even more at a loss. Shusha, I didn't want to tell you at first, but I hope that you're mentally prepared. Nobody wants the worst to happen, but I can't hide anything from you. Yun Shusha lowered her head and wiped her tears with the back of her hand. It's okay, it's okay. I asked you to tell the truth. But even though she was comforting him like this, his tears still flowed even more violently. Yun Shusha choked a little and said, that's impossible. Xiao-Chen and I video call each other every night. He seems very optimistic when I see his condition. I even thought that he would recover soon. I've already made plans to get him out of the hospital. Chu-ho sighed and said, that's because he didn't want you to worry. Actually, he knows his own condition best. I heard that there was one time when he went into shock after hanging up the phone because he was exhausted. He had to use a pacemaker to pull him back. Yun Shusha became nervous. Should I not video call him every day? Shusha, sit down first. When Chu-ho saw Yun Shusha's helpless expression, his heart ached terribly. Yun Shusha was extremely disappointed. Chapter 45-26. In front of Chu-ho, Yun Shusha wanted to remain calm. However, when she thought about how Xiao-Chen had forced himself to smile during the video call, the more sensible he was, the more her heart ached. When she thought about the possibility of losing him, the memories of the past resurfaced. Or perhaps, when she was about to lose him, she regretted not doing enough and had many regrets. She broke down and covered her face as she let out a suppressed cry. When Chu-ho saw this, his heart ached unbearably. She might not be able to empathize, but if the doctor told her today that Xiao Bao's condition was getting worse, she might break down even more than Yun Shusha. How is that possible? Yun Shusha couldn't figure it out. Shock. How could his condition be so serious? If it's already this serious, why didn't the doctor tell us? Chu Ho's expression was solemn. What's wrong with Xiao Ichen? Suddenly, Yo-Yo's startled voice came from the door. Shock. What shock? Yun Shusha raised her head in shock and looked in Yo-Yo's direction. However, she saw him holding Yueya's hand and standing at the door with a stunned expression. His fingers, which were holding the door frame, were trembling uncontrollably. Mommy, what's wrong with Xiao Ichen? Didn't you say that if there were no accidents, he'd recover soon? She didn't know when he had stood at the door, nor did she know how much he had heard. Yun Shusha was a little flustered. Yo-Yo. Don't be nervous, I heard everything just now. Yo-Yo said directly, I heard you guys say that Xiao Ichen's condition is very dangerous. What's going on? Yun Shusha bit her lip and didn't say anything. Mommy, tell me. Yo-Yo walked over quickly. Yuyaro was also frightened. Tears fell from her eyes. Children did not know how to hold back. What? She cried. Chu Ho was completely flustered. He hurriedly walked over and picked up Yuyao. Yuyao, don't cry, I don't want you. I want Big Brother. As Yuyao spoke, she couldn't stop crying. She clenched her fists and kicked her legs. I miss Big Brother. I want to see Big Brother. I haven't seen him for a long time. Woo woo. I want Big Brother. Yo-Yo grabbed Yun Shusha's hand tightly and almost interrogated her. Mommy, tell me. I don't know. I really don't know anything. What's going on with Xiao Ichen? I don't have any information at all. When Yo-Yo heard this, he frowned. His eyes flickered for a moment before he turned around and rushed out of the ward. Yun Shusha chased after him, only to see him rushing towards the doctor's office. Doctor. He rushed to the door of the doctor's office. Without knocking, he pushed the door open and entered. The doctor was sitting in front of the desk. In front of him sat a young couple who looked very down. When Yo-Yo saw this scene, his heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but he immediately suppressed it. Yo-Yo, what's the matter? When the doctor saw him, he looked concerned. What happened? Where's my brother? Yo-Yo walked over and glanced at the young couple. He saw that their eyes were red and it was obvious that they had been crying not long ago. When he saw the donation agreement on the table, his face turned pale with fright. Chapter 45:27. When the woman saw Yo-Yo, she seemed to be reminded of her daughter. She broke down and cried, Boo-hoo. I don't want to have another child. I've already lost Duo. She's still so young. Even if she's gone, I can't abandon her. If you ask me to have another child, I feel like I'm betraying Duo. Back then, if she had any symptoms of the flu, I could have sent her to the hospital in time. Perhaps she wouldn't have died so easily. As she spoke, the woman couldn't go on. Obviously, as her husband, he had just comforted her that they could have another child even if they lost their daughter. However, when she saw Yo-Yo and thought about how the last time she saw Duo was a cold corpse, her psychological barrier finally collapsed. The man quickly comforted her. Okay. We only have one child. We won't have another child. They had come this time to get their daughter's death certificate. However, when she saw the death certificate, her heart ached uncontrollably. The man was already very sad, but he still had to suppress it and comfort his wife. This flu had taken away their beloved daughter, but it had also taken away half of their lives. When Yo-Yo saw them crying, she became even more worried about Xiao Ichen. She walked to the doctor and asked worriedly, Where's my brother? How is he now? Can I see him? Your brother's condition is still considered stable. But the doctor hesitated for a moment. If you want to see him, it's a bit difficult. After all, he's now in the quarantine area. You can't go in. I want to see him. As Yo-Yo spoke, her voice gradually became choked. I really miss my brother. I want to see him, even if it's just once. You're not sick, right? Can't you still see the patient? That's because you're wearing protective clothing. I can wear it too. Yo-Yo looked at the woman and then at the man. She said to the doctor, Do you know why they're so sad? It's because they didn't even get to see their biological daughter even once until she died of illness. The next time they saw her, it was only a cold corpse. This is their lifelong regret. Doctor, I miss my brother. I want to see him. Please. With that, Yo-Yo stood firmly where she was, biting her lip and glaring at him with tears in her eyes. The doctor hesitated for a moment. I have to ask my superiors. You don't have to ask for instructions from your superiors. An extremely domineering voice suddenly came from the door. Yo-Yo and the doctor turned around simultaneously and saw Muyaja and Yunshusha standing at the door. Daddy. Muyaja looked at him, smiled, and looked at the doctor. Take us to him. Chairman Mu, no matter what the consequences are, I can bear it. I can also be responsible for my actions. Muyaja paused for a moment and said, I remember that the protective suits of your hospital were donated by the Shengyu Financial Group. These protective suits are made of imported nanomaterials, so you don't have to worry. Don't let us, the family members, bear the burden of regret because of your courtyard's superficial words. Sigh. The doctor finally sighed. All right. However, I still have to ask for instructions. My authority is limited. My words don't count. Then please take me to see the director. Okay. Muyaja followed the doctor. Chapter 45-28. The woman who had lost her daughter was crying so hard that she was about to faint. Her tears seemed to have dried up overnight. She could no longer cry, but she was still crying so hard that her whole body was twitching. Streaks of red tears could be seen on her face. How did this happen? The woman said sadly, I thought that everything would get better. Sob, 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 sob. Yunshusha wanted to comfort her, but she felt that she was in no position to do so. If she were in this woman's shoes, she would have fainted from crying. When a person was really sad, what they needed was not someone to comfort them, but a shoulder to lean on or to cry with them so that they could vent all the sadness in their heart through their tears. This was good too. After a while, Muyaja finally returned. Yunshusha stood up excitedly when she saw him. What did he say? The hospital director has agreed. We can go in and visit Xiao Ichen now. But Yuyaro can't go in. Okay. Even if Yuyaro can go in, I won't agree. She didn't even want Yo-Yo to go in with them. However, Yo-Yo must be worried sick about Xiao Ichen. If she didn't let him in, he would definitely be angry. After receiving instructions, the three of them couldn't wait to go to the quarantine area. They changed into sterile protective clothing and followed the doctor into the quarantine area. In fact, the quarantine area wasn't as scary as they had imagined. However, because the influenza virus was airborne, everyone who entered and left the quarantine area had to wear thick protective clothing. Even so, there were rumors that some doctors and nurses had died at their posts because they were too tired and didn't take proper protective measures. The first room in front is Muichen's bed. When Yo-Yo heard this, he immediately let go of Yunshusha's hand and ran into the room. When he opened the door, he saw that the heater was turned on. Moreover, he was wearing a mask, so his vision was foggy. Yo-Yo didn't have time to wipe the fog off the soft glass and ran to the bed. Xiao Ichen was lying on the bed with his eyes closed. It was hard to tell if he was awake or asleep. He walked over, and the sound of footsteps startled him. Xiao Ichen finally opened his eyes. When he saw Yo-Yo, he was shocked. Yo-Yo. It's me, brother. He called out. Xiao Ichen felt like he was in a fantasy. Firstly, this was the quarantine zone. How could Yo-Yo come in so easily? Secondly, how could this brat obediently call him big brother? Xiao Ichen mumbled to himself in a daze. Am I dreaming? Idiot, it's not a dream. It's not just me. Before he could finish speaking, Xiao Ichen saw Muyaja and Yunshusha enter the room. He was even more dumbfounded. Just as he was about to speak, he started coughing violently. Cough, cough, cough. He couldn't stop coughing. When Yo-Yo saw this, his heart ached and he was angry. Don't talk anymore. Didn't the doctor tell you to lie down properly? I'm not dreaming, am I? Xiao Ichen was suspicious again. He stammered, how could a brat like you be so obedient and call me big brother? Yo-Yo didn't know why, but Xiao Ichen's words sounded like he was teasing him. However, he didn't know why his eyes started to sting. Chapter 45-29. Was he that bad in the past? Yo-Yo's tears flowed uncontrollably. Choking, he said, bro. If you can't hear enough, I can keep calling you. You. When Xiao Chen saw that Yo-Yo was crying, he was at a loss. He felt helpless and tried hard to wipe his tears. However, Yo-Yo was wearing a sterile gown and his eyes were like soft glass. There was nothing he could do. He could only say sadly, don't cry. I was just joking. After a pause, he looked in the direction of Muyaja and Yunshusha. What's wrong with you guys? Why are you in the quarantine zone? You're making such a big fuss. I'll think that you're here to say goodbye to me. Don't say such depressing things. Yo-Yo pouted and pinched his cheeks gently. Because Xiao Chen was sick, he could not bear to use too much strength. Who's here to say goodbye to you? We just miss you. Yo-Yo's words shocked Xiao Chen. Oh my god. Was this the arrogant Yo-Yo who always said one thing and meant another? She actually told him that she missed him without any hesitation. This was too much. Xiao Chen pretended to be relaxed. There's no need for that. I'm actually doing quite well. The doctor said that my condition is slowly stabilizing. You're lying. Yo-Yo pouted. The doctor said that a little girl whose condition was not as serious as yours had already passed away. Ah, Xiao Chen let out a shorter sound. He looked at Yo-Yo in shock and disbelief. Are you talking about Duo? Yeah. I don't know if it was this morning or yesterday. Her parents just signed the donation agreement. No wonder I haven't seen her for a few days. Xiao Chen felt a wave of regret. When he heard that Duoduo's parents had signed the donation agreement, he could not help but ask, did she really listen to me and donate the body for research? What did you say? I said. Xiao Chen licked his lips and said straightforwardly, if I really can't be cured because of this flu, I'll donate my body so that the doctors can develop a vaccine as soon as possible. This flu is too annoying. If I die because of it, it won't have a good time either. Xiao Chen's original intention was to lighten the mood. However, his brain was clumsy and his mouth was thick. The words that came out of his mouth were not very pleasing. Yo-Yo pinched his lips and said, don't talk about death all the time. When did I say that all day long? Xiao Chen pushed Yo-Yo's hand away and explained, this isn't bad luck. Everyone who enters this quarantine zone is seriously ill. I also want to get better quickly, but my body isn't working well. There's nothing I can do. When Yo-Yo heard this, he suddenly hugged him sadly. I don't care. You have to get better quickly. This is an order. Xiao Chen looked at Yo-Yo and sighed helplessly. He gently patted his head and said, okay, I'll do as you say, Master Yo-Yo. Muyaja and Yunshusha looked at the two little guys who were deeply affectionate and were extremely touched. Yunshusha walked to the bedside and asked worriedly, why did you lose so much weight? I heard from the doctor that you have a bad appetite. It's not that I have a bad appetite. Chapter 45:30. Yunshusha's heart ached for him. No wonder he had lost so much weight. It wasn't like he had lost weight in a day or two. Had he been like this for so many days? Had he vomited after eating? Xiao Chen looked at Yunshusha and asked worriedly, Mommy, did the doctor say that my condition is very serious? Yunshusha could only sigh, not knowing how to answer. Yo-Yo was extremely straightforward. The doctor said that your condition is very serious. He even said that you went into shock once. If it wasn't for the timely rescue, you might have. Xiao Chen heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. It seems like I'm quite lucky. Xiao Chen was naturally optimistic. Even when he heard that he had almost died, he looked indifferent. Yo-Yo's heart ached when she saw this. Xiao Chen suddenly said, oh yes, Mommy, can I ask you for a favor? Yunshusha looked at him in confusion. What is it? What do you want me to do? If I'm like Duo, can you help me sign a donation agreement? Yunshusha's body trembled uncontrollably when she heard this. Tears rolled down her cheeks at once. Xiao Chen suddenly felt a little guilty. I didn't mean to make Mommy sad. It's just that the doctor said that my condition isn't optimistic, so I was thinking that if there's really no other way, can I be like Duo and donate my body to the hospital? Xiao Chen, give Mommy some confidence. Yunshusha said sadly, don't let Mommy think that way. Mommy can promise you that, but don't say such things again, okay? She and Muyaja were both open-minded people. They wouldn't object to the donation of a body because of some traditional beliefs. However, this didn't mean that Xiao Chen could bring it up. Now, no matter who it was, she hoped that they could give her more confidence. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to hold on much longer. It was like a slow death by 1,000 cuts. Every day, a piece of flesh would be cut off. Every day, another piece of flesh would be cut off. Xiao Chen was upset when he heard Yun Shusha's words. Mommy, Yun Shusha couldn't help but hug him tightly. Xiao Chen, it's Mommy's fault. I didn't cherish you when I should have. Perhaps, only when you're about to lose it will you understand how much Mommy owes you. Little Chen was stunned for a moment before he smiled. Mommy, don't say that. Are you trying to make me cry? You're as important as you. We can't lose you, much less lose you. You must not know this, but Yu Yaro misses you so much that she's gone crazy. She keeps asking to see you, but she's still so young. She can't possibly enter the quarantine zone. Can you bear to see her miss you so much? So you have to get better soon, okay? Xiao Chen could hold back his tears at first, but when he heard about Yu Yaro, his tears suddenly went out of control. He couldn't suppress the sadness and uneasiness in his heart anymore. He bit his lip tightly and said hoarsely, Mommy, I miss Yu Yaro too. Yun Shusha wiped his tears and said helplessly, You and Yo-Yo are a pair of clowns. You're always fighting and can't seem to get along well. Didn't you see how Yo-Yo slammed the doctor's table just to see you? Xiao Chen turned to look at Yo-Yo, but he turned his face away. His cheeks were red. No. Don't listen to Mommy. Chapter 45-31. Xiao Chen knew that Yo-Yo didn't mean what he said, but he was very touched that Yo-Yo was willing to do so for him. It's better not to enter the quarantine zone. Xiao Chen said to Yo-Yo, I feel that it's very risky. After all, it's better to be cautious. Yo-Yo pouted and said, Then promise me that you'll get better quickly. I promise you. If I can get better quickly, I'll promise you anything. I don't care. Yo-Yo said domineeringly, Hurry up and promise me. Okay. Xiao Chen rubbed his head and pouted. I promise you. I promise you. The three of them couldn't stay in the quarantine zone for too long. Yun Shusha reminded Xiao Chen repeatedly before leaving with Muyaja and Yo-Yo reluctantly. At the same time, at Hurricane Group, Alice suddenly received news about Gongjie. The remnants of the sacred shrine have been completely eliminated. However, the leader of the mercenaries who was in charge of Gongjie's safety replied, Young Master Jie is also seriously injured. Moreover, with the flu raging, he can't pass through the customs for the time being. The return route to Hurricane Group can't be approved. Also, the FBI is monitoring the hospital. Young Master Jie is being kept in the hospital and can't leave. FBI. Alice held the satellite phone and was puzzled. Why are the FBI people there? Gongjie was ranked first on the FBI's wanted list and was the FBI's #1 target. They didn't expect Gongjie to be targeted by the FBI. Damn it. Alice was so angry that she almost threw the phone. If Gongjie was targeted by the FBI and brought back to the FBI headquarters, he would definitely be sent to military court. Hurricane Group was an important obstacle to international security. As for Gongjie, international security laws were applicable. Once convicted, the Gongjie would face hundreds of years in prison. At that time, once he was locked up in the military prison, it would be extremely difficult for him to leave. Alice immediately reported the news to Gong Shaoying. When Gong Shaoying heard the news, he said without thinking, In my opinion, the remaining members of the Sacred Hall of Light are bait used by the FBI to attract Gongjie. Where is little Jie now? He's in the East African Neutral Hospital. He's currently under the protection of the East African president, but once he leaves the hospital, the FBI will have reason to arrest him immediately. Gong Shaoying lowered his head and fell into deep thought. The president of East Africa had a good relationship with the Hurricanes. Usually, when there was an armed war, the Hurricanes would provide a lot of military assistance to East Africa. The FBI belonged to the M Federation. Therefore, they did not have the authority to make arrests in East Africa. However, If Gong Jie left the hospital, then anything could happen. With the military strength that little Jie brought, we won't be able to safely cover little Jie's departure for the time being. I'm thinking if I should send some troops over, but the international air route can't be approved. Now that the global flu crisis is over, it's very tense. Gong Xiaoying said, so what? If they don't approve, then fly over by force and bring him back. No matter how powerful one's background was, if a private jet wanted to fly, it had to be approved by the international air route. However, if they didn't get permission to fly by force, it would be considered a black flight. If it was in local territory, it might not be a big deal. At most, they would face a huge compensation. Chapter 45-32. If they were forced to fly, they might face a small skirmish. It's too dangerous. Alice still had some lingering fears. If we were to be shot down as a terrorist attack, the losses would outweigh the gains. Then can you think of another way to bring Shoro Jie back? Gong Xiaoying asked her. Alice was silent. I didn't expect you to do it like this. No matter what price I have to pay, I want you to bring him back unharmed. Yes. I understand. Alice had just walked out of Gong Xiaoying's room when she saw Hua Jin standing at the door anxiously. When he saw her, he immediately rushed over. I heard that there's news about Gong Jie. Alice was a little surprised. How did you know? Hua Jin was a little helpless. I just eavesdropped on you. I saw you rushing into the study, so I was worried that something had happened to Gong Jie. Alice turned around and looked at him warily. She immediately pulled him aside and warned him sternly, you shouldn't have eavesdropped on my conversation with Master. If he finds out, he'll be angry. Moreover, you're not a member of Hurricane. You shouldn't have eavesdropped on my conversation with him. But you didn't tell me anything. I didn't have time. It was an emergency. Hua Jin lowered his head. Sorry, after a pause, he said, I just heard you say that there's news about Gong Jie. Yeah. But, he's injured. Injured? Hua Jin was even more nervous now. He grabbed her shoulders tightly. Is it serious? Is it life-threatening? It's not a big deal if he's injured, but he's being targeted by the FBI. FBI? When Hua Jin heard this, he was a little confused. What's wrong with the FBI? From what he knew, or perhaps it was because he had been taught in movies, the FBI was the righteous party. Alice narrowed her eyes and looked at him, guessing what he was thinking. Do you think that the FBI is no big deal? That they're the righteous party and won't do anything to Gong Jie? Yeah. What else? You seem to have forgotten. Alice reminded him faintly, Hurricane is not the righteous party. Shoro Jie is the crown prince of Hurricane and is also a thorn in the side of the Federal Security Organization. If the FBI catches Shoro Jie, he'll definitely be sent to the military court. Military court? Hua Jin grew even more nervous. What will happen then? He'll be sentenced. You can ransom him. Do you think the international court? Hua Jin was even more confused now. Then, if I'm sentenced, how long will it be? A few 100 years. You can understand it as a life sentence. In international law, sentences are accumulated according to the level of the crime. Many war criminals were sentenced to hundreds of years in prison, which was equivalent to life imprisonment. Usually, in a domestic murder case, no matter how many victims there were, it would be considered as intentional homicide. But in the Anglo-American legal system and the international court, every person killed would be convicted of murder. In the end, the criminal punishment for each crime would be added together, resulting in a sentence of hundreds of years. Hua Jin widened his eyes in shock. Hundreds of years. Anyway, the most important thing now is to bring Shoro Jie back as soon as possible. That's scary. Hua Jin reacted. How could he forget that Gong Jie was the #1 target on the wanted list? Chapter 45-33. Then what should we do? Hua Jin said, we have to save him as soon as possible. I'll go and approve the flight route first. Alice said, you don't have to worry about anything. Just stay on the island. I want to go too. Alice glared at him. What are you going to do? I can help a little, right? Alice was speechless. You go, as long as you don't drag me down. Okay. I promise that I won't be a burden. Hua Jin thought that she had agreed and made a solemn vow. Alice glared at him, but she didn't have any temper. Anyway, you just stay on the island. Alice left without looking back. Hua Jin looked at the direction she left unwillingly and clenched his fists. Alice, the flight route still can't be approved. East Africa was not a peaceful place now. In addition to the war, there was an outbreak of influenza, and the fierce plague brought about by the war. The epidemic spread, and the international air routes had been blocked, all the routes to and from East Africa. At present, the war was in a stalemate. In addition, the troops of various countries could not enter East Africa. If it's not allowed, then we'll fly by force. Alice gave the order, and the logistics department immediately went to prepare the materials needed for the flight. Alice asked Vermilion Bird to dispatch 3 troops of mercenaries. The number of mercenaries was not important, but the quality. This time, in order to bring Gongjie back safely, Vermilion Bird dispatched almost all the elites to Alice. They set off at a quiet dawn. Alice calculated the time. If there were no accidents, they would land in East Africa at night. The flight route avoided other countries as much as possible. At present, East Africa had fallen, and it would not pose any threat to the flight and landing. As long as they did not pass through other countries, it should be fine. This kind of thing could not be foolproof, but Alice avoided all the accidents as much as possible. At dawn, the mercenaries boarded the plane in an orderly manner. After Alice counted the supplies and the number of people, she found that there was one more person. He guessed that Vermilion Bird must have felt that this person was not enough, so she sent another mercenary. Thus, he did not think too much and prepared to set off. The hatch slowly closed. Wearing the combat suit, Hua Jin carried the heavy combat bag. Looking at the tightly shut cabin door, he finally let out a sigh of relief. When Alice dispatched the mercenaries, he secretly stole a house, disguised himself as a mercenary, and boarded the plane. Although Alice had repeatedly emphasized how dangerous this trip was, he still didn't care. He didn't know what possessed him, but when he thought of the danger Gongjie was in, he couldn't stay on the island and wait for his return. He could only repeatedly warn himself not to be a burden to Gongjie. Even though he knew that his actions were a little rash, but Hua Jin heaved a deep sigh. Beside him, a mercenary spoke. Everyone, be vigilant. We are facing the FBI this time. The FBI is the most treacherous. In order to achieve their goals, they will do anything. In short, be vigilant. Understood. The one who gave the order was a relatively authoritative captain. Hua Jin looked at him and did not speak. After dawn, the sky turned white. The plane finally took off. Chapter 45-34. Hua Jin was jolted awake by a strong jolt. He opened his eyes in shock. The fuselage was traveling through the airflow and was shaking violently. However, the mercenaries beside him were already used to this kind of jolt. They hugged their combat hugs and continued to sleep. They were indeed well-trained mercenaries. Even their sleeping posture was uniform. Hua Jin was a little thirsty. He rummaged in the combat bag for water. Footsteps were approaching. He raised his head alertly and saw Alice looking over. Before he could lower his cap, Alice exclaimed, "Hua Jin." Hua Jin raised his hand awkwardly and waved at her. "Hi, haha, what a coincidence." Alice also raised her hand and slapped him hard on the top of his head. "Why are you here?" And Alice tugged at his clothes in disgust and asked suspiciously, "What's with your clothes?" Also, what's up with your equipment?" Alice snatched his heavy combat bag and opened it. There were all kinds of dry food, snacks, and drinks. His eyelids suddenly twitched violently. I was afraid that there would be no food and water along the way, so I prepared some in advance. Last time in East Africa, he and Gongjie almost starved to death. That was because he learned his lesson and prepared dry food in advance, just in case. Alice slapped him on the head again. "Ouch. That hurts. Do you want to die?" Alice put on a fierce expression and said fiercely, "You can't even protect yourself. Why are you following us? Why are you joining us?" Hua Jin raised his hand and swore, "I swear, I won't drag you guys down. You have such a big bag full of food. Are you running away? Also, The scariest thing in East Africa is not the FBI, but the plague. Do you know about the plague? If you get infected with the plague, your life will be over. Hua Jin pursed his lips. Anyway, no matter how much you scold me, I'm still going. No one could stop his will. Alice was startled. She looked at Hua Jin, who seemed to be secretly angry, and sighed helplessly. Okay, I got it. It's useless to say anything now. You've already boarded the plane. Can I still throw you out of the plane? Hua Jin's face immediately changed from gloomy to affectionate, revealing a puppy-like smile. You're still laughing. Hua Jin immediately stopped laughing. Alice turned around and glanced at a man who was staring at her in a daze. She ordered, Jack. Yes. You are in charge of this guy's safety. Jack looked at Hua Jin with disdain. Hua Jin saw the look of disdain in his eyes and pretended not to see it, but he was not convinced in his heart. Was he that weak? Did he have to look at him with such disdain? I don't need anyone to protect me. I can protect myself. Hua Jin patted his combat bag and said, I brought my own gun. When in danger, he would never give in. If he was not convinced, he would fight. Alice slapped him again. Since you're on the plane, you have to obey all orders. Otherwise, if you piss me off, I will really throw you out of the plane. She looked at Hua Jin with a threatening gaze. Chapter 45-35. There wasn't a single light in the hospital ward. The curtains were all drawn, blocking out the bright sunlight outside the window. Gong Jie stood by the window and gently lifted a corner of the curtains. With a strong ray of light, he immediately caught a glimpse of a few blonde men in casual clothes walking back and forth below the hospital. No matter how the FBI disguised themselves, their appearance was too obvious among the tanned doctors and nurses. This group of people had been loitering around the hospital floor for so long. It was said that the FBI had gathered elites with high IQ, but in his opinion, their IQ was lacking. However, a fool couldn't win against a large number of people. This time, the FBI had sent over 30 fully armed people. They were determined to arrest him and bring him back to the military court. He put down the curtains and turned around. In the room, a few mercenaries were sitting on the sofa, playing with the guns in their hands. Young Master Jie, your injury hasn't healed yet. Go back to bed and lie down. Gong Jie returned to the bed and sat down. When will Alice arrive? If there are no accidents, she should arrive in East Africa tomorrow. How many people did she bring? 3 troops. That's enough. Gong Jie crossed his arms and leaned against the headboard. He said coldly, when we get back, we'll settle the score with the FBI. The FBI is really shrewd. They purposely leaked the news of the remaining members to Hurricane, and Gong Jie cleaned up the remaining members. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Gong Jie's whereabouts were undoubtedly exposed to the FBI's eyes. However, it was still a little difficult to catch him. This hospital was a neutral hospital. It was not bound by any government treaty, nor was it bound by any international law. This was a hospital set up by humanitarian organizations to stop donations. No official organization could carry out any arrest activities here. The FBI was backed by the Federation, so they had no right to arrest anyone in the hospital. However, it was obvious how determined the FBI was to catch him. If he didn't leave the hospital, they would wait at the door. Was Gong Jie going to stay in the hospital for the rest of his life? Thus, the FBI waited at the hospital all night. Originally, Gong Jie didn't care about the FBI. However, after eradicating the remnants of the Sacred Halls sect, the mercenaries he brought out were greatly weakened. If they were to clash head-on with the FBI, the gains would not make up for the losses. The plane landed smoothly at the airport in East Africa. Instead of calling it an airport, it would be more accurate to call it a wasteland. Previously, the armed forces had wantonly bombed the railways, airports, and all the transportation fortresses into ruins. The plane hovered over the ruins for a long time before landing on a grassy area next to the airport. After the plane landed, everyone got off the plane. Looking at the devastated airport, no one was surprised. They were used to war. Only Hua Jin, he was stunned by the scene in front of him. Living in a peaceful country, he had never thought that war would bring about such cruelty. Even though he had experienced the war personally, East Africa had become like this after not seeing it for such a long time. It was a complete mess, and not a single blade of grass grew. It was said that East Africa had temporarily stopped fighting because of the plague, but no one knew when the war would rage again. The peacekeeping force had already intervened, but now it was useless. What are you waiting for? Chapter 45-36. Hua Jin asked curiously, "Are we going straight to the hospital now?" Alice frowned and said, "Let's not go to the hospital first. The flight is tiring. Let's go to the relay station to rest first." Okay. Alice had asked Hua Jin to listen to her no matter what. Hua Jin did not dare to make his own decisions. He was afraid that he would cause trouble for her and Gong Jie. At the same time, good news came from the hospital. The Capital Medical University had successfully developed a vaccine against influenza. After several tests, the success rate of the vaccine was guaranteed. However, it would take some time before the vaccine could be put into use. The safety of the vaccine had to be confirmed before it could be widely used. The entire world was in a state of panic in the 2 months between the beginning of the pandemic and the introduction of the vaccine. The Capital Medical University was the first to develop an inactivated vaccine, which shocked the entire world. No one expected Country Z to be the first to develop a vaccine against influenza. At that time, they had only received news that the vaccine was successfully developed. No one knew when the vaccine would be put into use. However, this gave Yun Shusha a glimmer of hope. The successful development of the vaccine meant that the influenza was not invincible. At the same time, she also hoped that the vaccine could be tested and put into use as soon as possible. Xiao Bao's condition had stabilized. The doctor said that his condition would not worsen for the time being. His body was under control, which was the best outcome. However, Xiao Chen's condition was not as ideal. A week before the vaccine was developed, his condition worsened. Yun Shusha even signed the donation agreement under the doctor's suggestion. When signing the agreement, Mu Yaja did not mind signing it. However, this was Xiao Chen's wish. He did not know if he could survive the flu. He did not know if he could wait until the vaccine was developed. During the development period, the development of the vaccine was kept a secret from the public. Xiao Chen thought that if he did not survive this time, he would donate his body to the Capital Medical University to be used in the vaccine experiment. Yun Shusha could not bear to do that. However, this was Xiao Chen's wish. That was his body. He had the right to make his own decisions. Although she could not bear to part with it, since it was Xiao Chen's wish, she had to work hard to fulfill it for him. That night, Xiao Chen's condition worsened and he was pushed into the operating room. Outside the operating room, Yun Shusha officially signed the donation agreement. After signing her name, she was completely defeated. Mu Yaja hugged her as they watched over little Ichen, who was undergoing emergency treatment in the operating theater. This was the 4th time this month that Xiao Chen's condition worsened. Yu Yu carried Yu Yaro and stood guard outside the operating theater. From the start, he did not expect Xiao Chen's condition to deteriorate to this extent. He even felt that, apart from Yu Yaro, he was in the greatest danger. Little Ichen was in good health, so he would definitely be fine. However, he did not expect that Xiao Chen, who was in the best condition in everyone's eyes, would fall the fastest and his condition worsened the most. Due to the worsening of his condition, he had not seen Xiao Chen for a few days. On the contrary, he did not want to see Xiao Chen now. This was because he knew that if he were to see Xiao Chen now, there would only be one situation. Chapter 45-37. Yun Shusha couldn't figure it out. Finally, the vaccine was successfully developed, but why couldn't Xiao Chen hold on? Yo-Yo paced back and forth outside the operating theater, holding back his tears. He didn't dare to cry, and he didn't want to cry. He was afraid that if he cried and shed tears, little Chen would really leave him. Why should he cry when it wasn't confirmed yet? Yo-Yo forced himself to calm down. He turned to look at Yun Shusha, who was covering her face and waiting anxiously. However, he couldn't comfort her. Even he himself was worried sick. How could he pretend to be calm and comfort Mommy? Xiao Chen, Didn't you always say that we have telepathy? Yo-Yo stared at the door of the operating theater and thought to himself, you always said that we don't have telepathy, so I definitely don't care about you. Can you hear my voice now? On the operating table. Xiao Ichen lay weakly on the operating theater. His body was covered with machines and an oxygen respirator. He could vaguely hear a voice calling out to him. Xiao Ichen, can you hear my voice? Xiao Ichen opened his eyes wide. Even though the operating lights were glaring, he still opened his eyes wide. It was Yo-Yo's voice. He heard Yo-Yo's voice. Yo-Yo. He struggled to get up, but the nurse pressed him down. Don't be agitated. Doctor, why did the patient suddenly get up? He opened his eyes. He seems to have regained consciousness. The doctors and nurses gathered around. They were a little uneasy when they saw Xiao Ichen's eyes wide open. Could it be the final radiance of the setting sun? Check the patient's heart rate and blood pressure immediately. Doctor, it's not good. His blood pressure is dropping rapidly. His heart rate is also declining. Resuscitate him immediately. Mu Ichen, listen carefully. There was a flash of white light. Xiao Ichen opened his eyes again. However, he was in a daze when he saw an empty darkness. In the darkness, he could vaguely see a thin figure standing there. He was a little confused and couldn't help but walk closer. As for the shadow in the camera, it swayed slightly and actually walked towards him. Xiao Ichen was a little alarmed. He took half a step back until Yo-Yo's figure became clearer. Yo-Yo. Xiao Ichen's eyes. In his chaotic dream, he even forget that he was still lying on the operating theater. Since last night, after his condition had worsened, he had been having many dreams. In a trance, he felt that he was in reality for a moment, and in an illusion for a moment. He was gradually unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. When the boy saw him, he ran over excitedly and hugged his shoulders. You're not allowed to leave us. Do you understand? Xiao Ichen was confused when he heard this. What did I do? The doctor said that your condition has worsened. You might not make it. Yo-Yo could no longer pretend to be calm. Her eyes turned red. Mu Ichen, you're not allowed to give up. Do you understand? Who said that my condition has worsened? Xiao Ichen was baffled. Idiot, aren't I fine? Yo-Yo stared at his face for a long time before she finally said, Mu Ichen, thank you. Chapter 45-38. Thank you for appearing in my life. But don't leave so easily. It wasn't easy for me to fall in love with a brother like you. Are you going to abandon me for no reason? Yo-Yo was a little agitated. Mu Ichen, can you work harder? I heard from Mommy that the Capital Medical University has already developed a vaccine for this influenza. You have to hang in there, don't give up now. When Xiao Ichen heard this, he finally understood what was going on. He looked around and realized that this world wasn't the real world. And Yo-Yo wasn't really standing in front of him. It was probably just an illusion. He was critically ill. Was it that serious? He had been in a coma for a long time. Even before he was critically ill, he had been in a coma for a long time and had been relying on the nutrient solution to sustain his life. Perhaps he had been too careless in the past. He had always thought that this influenza virus was probably just a relatively serious cold. When it worsened and became infected with pneumonia, Xiao Ichen, who was optimistic by nature, didn't take it seriously. He felt that he would definitely be able to survive this dangerous period. He believed that he was the chosen one and that God wouldn't make things too difficult for him. Otherwise, he would still be able to easily turn danger into safety after walking through danger so many times. This was just a test. However, the deterioration of his condition was contrary to his optimistic thinking. Gradually, he even needed to use a ventilator to prevent himself from suffocating in his sleep, from being monitored for 12 hours to 24 hours a day, and later, from being able to ingest liquid food to only being able to use nutrient solutions to maintain vital signs. He slowly accepted the fact that this aggressive influenza was definitely not as easy to deal with as he had imagined. As the pneumonia spread, it slowly spread to his other organs. So, wasn't he in the real world now? Yo-Yo said to him, "You're in the resuscitation room now. Everyone is waiting for you, so you have to pull yourself together." You can't give up just like that, okay? Xiao Chen was a little confused. I'm in the resuscitation room, idiot, don't you feel anything? Xiao Chen did not know whether to laugh or cry. I really don't feel anything. If not for Yo-Yo waking him up, his consciousness would still be in the chaotic space and he would not be aware of his current situation. Yo-Yo, don't worry. I'll definitely get better. That's all talk, I don't believe it. Unless. Yo-Yo suddenly smiled with tears in her eyes and stretched out her pinky finger. Unless you pinky swear with me, pinky promise. When Xiao Chen saw this, he smiled helplessly and stuck out his pinky. I really don't know what to do with you. Let's pinky swear then. Pinky promise. Don't change your mind for 100 years. After Xiao Chen finished speaking, he couldn't help but ask curiously. Yo-Yo, I'm a little curious. You said pinky swear, but why did you have to hang yourself? And not to change for 100 years. Don't tell me that I have to hang myself for 100 years if I promise something to someone. Because, Yo-Yo rolled her eyes and explained helplessly, hang yourself refers to the amount of strings of money in the past. For example, a string of coins. In ancient times, copper coins were not easy to keep, so they were strung together with a string so that they would not fall. Hang yourself was a metaphor for making a decision and not changing it. Do you understand? Okay. Chapter 45-39. You're obviously keeping me in suspense. Yes, I'm keeping you in suspense. Come and chase me if you can. Yo-Yo ran far away. Xiao Chen could not help but chase after him. However, he saw a ray of white light at the end of the tunnel. It was getting bigger and bigger. Yo-Yo's figure gradually disappeared into the white light without a trace. Xiao Chen chased into the depths of the white light. He felt his entire body being enveloped by a scorching light. His body gradually rose into the air. It was as if he was in the depths of an invisible sea. He was slowly floating to the surface. At this moment, it was as if an invisible hand was pulling him down by his ankle. Xiao Chen kicked with all his might, trying to break free from the restraints on his ankle. However, the hand refused to let go. Xiao Chen paddled with both hands, trying to float to the surface. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not break free from the hand. He gradually sank deeper and deeper. Let go. He kicked with all his might. Finally, the hand let go. Xiao Chen took the opportunity to swim to the surface of the sea. He looked up, but all he could see was white. Then, he felt as if his soul was being sucked up by a powerful force. Beep, sizzle, thump. His body fell back onto the bed. Xiao Chen suddenly opened his eyes. A thick layer of mist covered his breathing mask. The doctor was holding the pacemaker. When he saw that Xiao Chen had finally opened his eyes, he asked in surprise, "How's his blood pressure? What's his heart rate?" His heart rate is gradually returning to a stable level. His blood pressure is slowly decreasing. The doctor opened Xiao Chen's eyes and shone his pupils. He finally heaved a sigh of relief. "Little guy, you gave us all a fright. Don't make such jokes in the future. It's a miracle that he woke up. He's already been in the jaws of death for a few rounds. The other side refused to take him in, so he had to come back." Haha. Xiao Chen's life was finally out of danger. The atmosphere in the operating theater gradually relaxed. "Don't scare us like this again. You know, you're the little celebrity of our quarantine zone. No one wants anything to happen to you." One of the nurses who doted on Xiao Chen the most walked over and gently tugged at Xiao Chen's hand. "That's right, Xiao Chen. Promise us, okay? Once the vaccine is out, you'll be able to leave this place safely." Xiao Chen was extremely weak. He struggled to break free from the hands of the Grim Reaper, using almost all of his strength. At this moment, he could only nod slightly. He did not even have the strength to open his mouth to speak. Outside the operating theater, the operating lights finally went off. Yo-Yo's heart skipped a beat when she saw the lights go off. Yun Shusha was so nervous that she grabbed Muyaja's arm tightly, almost pinching it. Even though it hurt, Muyaja didn't say anything. He only cared about comforting her. "Shusha, don't be so nervous. The lights are off. Where's Xiao Chen?" She was so scared. When the door opened, what she had been waiting for was a bed covered with a white cloth. He won't. Don't think too much. Mu Yaja didn't know what the situation was, but the most important thing right now was to comfort Yun Shusha. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Yun Shusha actually comforted him. The door was finally pushed open. Chapter 45-40. Yo-Yo immediately rushed over. Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja also rushed over anxiously. The chief surgeon smiled when he saw how anxious they were and immediately comforted them. The surgery went smoothly. Don't worry, Mu-Chen is in good condition now. Really? Yun Shusha's voice became a little shrill because of her surprise. Yo-Yo was relieved when he heard that Xiao-Chen was fine. He took half a step back and gave Yun Shusha the spot closest to the bed. Since he knew that Mu-Chen was in good condition, he was relieved. He was not in a hurry to take a look. Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja surrounded the bed. If it were not for the isolation suits, they would have given Xiao-Chen a hug. It was strange. When he first met Xiao-Chen, he could not accept him as an older brother at all. As they slowly got along, even though he accepted Xiao-Chen as an older brother, deep in his heart, he could not accept that Yun Shusha had given half of her love for him to Xiao-Chen. There was no such thing as sharing. Love was limited, just like time. When you gave your love to another person, you would leave less for that person. Yo-Yo did not want anyone to share his mommy's love with him. But now, he hoped that Yun Shusha would give Xiao-Chen more of her love. If it were not for this life and death experience, he would not have realized how important Xiao-Chen was to him. He did not even realize that he was so afraid of losing Xiao-Chen. In fact, he had opened his heart to Xiao-Chen long ago. It was just that he could not bring himself to say certain things because of his dignity. Perhaps Xiao-Chen also thought that he had not completely accepted him. This was because there were some things that others would not know if they were not said. There were some things that the loved one would never know if they were not said out loud. Moreover, he always said one thing and meant another. He clearly liked her, but said that he did not. He clearly loved her, but said that he did not love her. He clearly cared, but said that he did not care. He clearly hoped that Yun Shusha would love Xiao-Chen more, but on the surface, he always pretended to be fighting with Xiao-Chen for her love. Xiao-Chen also misunderstood his words and actions. He thought that Yo cared more about Yun Shusha's love than him as an older brother. Thus, he was very sensible and mature. He withdrew the portion that originally belonged to him. Little Chen must be very lonely after all this time. He was still a child, so he should be more coquettish and unreasonable. However, he was so sensible and mature. He had a steadiness that was not expected of someone his age. Now, he had Yu Yao. Mommy's love was going to be cut off again. But, Yu would work hard to fill the void that had existed for so long with his love. Unknowingly, his face was wet. Yu reached out to touch his cheeks, only to realize that he had been crying unknowingly. Perhaps it was because he was too emotional. He was too emotional because Xiao-Chen was safe and sound. He wanted to give Xiao-Chen a big hug. He wanted to hug him tightly and say to him, Xiao-Chen, welcome back. Xiao-Chen, welcome back. Chapter 45-41. At the same time, East Africa. Alice rushed to the hospital with a large team. She arranged the police around the hospital and entered the hospital with Hua Jin in disguise. Then, they sneaked into Gong Jie's room. In comparison, Gong Jie's room was relatively safe. However, outside the room, there was heavy security. The FBI had already monitored the entire room. Gong Jie was slightly injured. Although he had passed the critical period, when he was first sent to the hospital, if the wound had not been infected, the FBI would not have had the chance to do so. When injured in East Africa, the scariest thing was the plague and wound infection, as well as the complications after infection and inflammation. Because of the war, there were corpses everywhere. It was also because of these corpses that bacteria and viruses spread wantonly. Hua Jin had just walked into the ward when he saw Gong Jie leaning on the bed in full armor. He was pleasantly surprised. Gong, he had just said one word when he realized that he seemed to be overly excited and immediately restrained himself. Gong Jie did not expect that Hua Jin would suddenly appear. He turned his puzzled gaze to Alice. Alice whistled and quickly distanced herself. It has nothing to do with me. He snuck in himself. Snuck in? Gong Jie was doubtful of this statement. Alice lifted Hua Jin's collar with a look of disdain and the corners of her lips twitched. Please, do you know how he snuck into the army? He stole the mercenary uniform and combat bag, wrapped himself up tightly, and then openly snuck in. I'm convinced that I didn't even notice. Gong Jie's expression turned ugly when he heard this. What are you doing here? Hua Jin casually made up an excuse. I'm just here to take a look. You came to a war-torn area to take a look. Gong Jie snorted coldly. If your words are posted online, you'll be called a brainless idol. Hua Jin heaved a sigh of relief. I'm not a public figure anymore. There's no need for such taboos. When he was a public figure, he had to be on tenterhooks with every word he said. Every nerve in his body had to be stretched taut. Even when facing the camera, every word and sentence had to be prepared by the public relations company. Every word was very meticulous. If it was an ordinary person, even if they made a few jokes in private, it would be harmless and no one would take it to heart. As for public figures, their flaws and strengths would be magnified infinitely. Even if it was an unintentional mistake, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. After leaving the entertainment industry for so long, he still hadn't gotten used to such a relaxed lifestyle. There were no paparazzi following them in the dark, and there were no busy drafts. Gradually, they could speak as they pleased. Alice glanced at Hua Jin from the corner of her eyes and said helplessly, Hey, do you have to be so arrogant? Why don't you just say that you're worried? Hua Jin was still stubborn. Who's worried? When Gong Jie heard this, his tense handsome face suddenly relaxed a little. Oh, you're here because you're worried about me? No. Hua Jin denied flatly and glared at Alice. If you talk nonsense again, you'll what? Chapter 45-42. Gong Jie looked at Hua Jin with a teasing gaze. The latter whistled awkwardly. She made it up. Got it. Of course, Gong Jie could tell that he was lying to him. Hua Jin snorted in his heart. What? Wasn't this man fine? He didn't have a broken arm or a broken leg like he had imagined. He thought that Gong Jie was seriously injured and trapped in East Africa. But in the end, his leg was fine, and so was his arm. He didn't even know how to cry the tears he had prepared all the way here. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have come. He would have taken such a big risk. But that was how he acted in a fit of pique. He heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Gong Jie was fine and had only suffered some minor injuries. He did not know how serious his injuries were, but at least he was not in any serious condition for now. Nothing was more important than a person being fine. Outside the hospital, the FBI has deployed many people. According to my observation, the hospital is surrounded by more than 20 agents. As for how many are outside the hospital, I'm not sure. Alice and Gong Jie sat opposite each other. The huge ward was filled with mercenaries. Gong Jie furrowed his brows in frustration. They won't give up until they catch me. They've schemed so much just to bring you back to the Nuremberg military court. I think those judges are already rubbing their hands and getting ready. If they can put you on trial, they can immediately retire with glory. That's not the problem. Gong Jie looked out of the window thoughtfully. I'm only thinking about one problem now. Alice looked at him in confusion. What's the problem? Gong Jie looked at her meaningfully. Do you still remember what day tomorrow is? Tomorrow? After he mentioned it, Alice was a little confused for a moment. That's right. Was tomorrow an important day? Alice raised her watch and looked at the date on it. She calculated tomorrow's date, but she couldn't think of anything important. Is there anything important tomorrow? Alice was at a loss. Gong Jie snorted in disdain and crooked his finger at her. Come here. Alice inched toward him curiously, but the man unceremoniously pinched her nose and flicked her forehead. It's my birthday tomorrow, dummy. Alice covered her forehead in pain, but when she heard Gong Jie say that tomorrow was her birthday, her eyes flickered a little. She slapped her forehead again. How could I forget? It's your birthday tomorrow. Maybe you haven't gotten over the jet lag yet. I think you don't care about this at all. Don't worry. Where's the present? Gong Jie opened his palm to her like a child, asking for a gift. Alice braced herself and replied, I didn't prepare a gift. Gong Jie cast a sidelong glance at her, clearly expressing his dissatisfaction. Behind them, Hua Jin looked at them silently. He felt that there was an indescribable chemistry between the two of them. It was said that the two of them had known each other for a long time and had gone through fire and water together. This kind of chemistry couldn't be cultivated overnight. Moreover, Alice had sacrificed so much for him. Because Gong Jie was infected with the virus, in order to save him, Alice used her own body to experiment on the vaccine. If it weren't for her, Gong Jie wouldn't have been able to survive the infection of the virus. And because her body was affected by the experiment, she lost her fertility. Chapter 45-43. She had never told him about it. Why? Was she afraid that he would feel guilty if he found out? Perhaps, she did not want this matter to bind Gong Jie for the rest of his life. If it were another woman, she might have told Gong Jie about this matter to make him feel guilty. This way, her love would become righteous. Then, what if it was him? If he had sacrificed so much for someone, would he really remain silent? So far, the only person who could make him sacrifice without any complaints was Yun Shusha. He had not dared to think that he would remove his cornea for Yun Shusha. He had not dared to think about it before. He even thought that he would not do it. But now that things had developed to that point, he did it almost without any hesitation. Then, if the same thing happened again and the other party was Gong Jie, would he still do it? To be honest, he did not know if he could do what Alice did. Alice's love for Gong Jie was too heavy and too great. For Gong Jie, she personally brought people and came to East Africa to look for him regardless of the consequences. She loved Gong Jie so much. Why did she not confess to him? If Gong Jie knew about this, what would he think? Hua Jin was deep in thought when he heard Alice say, "You're still thinking about a birthday present at this juncture." He came back to his senses and looked at Alice. However, he saw Alice looking at Gong Jie with a look of disdain. "It's my birthday tomorrow. I'll have to trouble you. I'll celebrate it with you when we get back to the island." I want to celebrate it." Gong Jie even sighed. "Originally, I wanted to rush back to celebrate my birthday with my sister. He was born on the same day as Yun Shusha. His biggest wish was to celebrate his birthday with Yun Shusha every year. He was afraid that he could not do it this year." Gong Jie could not help but feel a little regretful. "I'll go outside and check if there are any FBI soldiers in the hospital." As Alice spoke, she stood up, looked around, and said to Hua Jin, "You, stay in the ward obediently, do you hear me?" "I heard you." Alice walked out with her men. Hua Jin stared at Gong Jie's back. For a moment, he was in a daze. He was hesitating whether or not he should tell him about it. It wasn't that he was being nosy. Instead, he had the right to know who had risked their lives to save him back then. It was not that he wanted to fight for something for Alice. Instead, it was a personal sacrifice. Although it was not for the sake of getting what he wanted, at the very least, he wanted to let Gong Jie know that he had paid such a huge price. This was the right of Gong Jie. It was also Alice's duty. Similarly, there was one more thing he wanted to confirm. Hua Jin suddenly plucked up his courage, walked in front of Gong Jie, and sat down opposite him. Gong Jie's knuckles, which were holding the teacup, stiffened. He looked at him in a daze. He had a feeling that he had something important to say to him. "What's the matter?" "I think that Alice is actually quite good." Gong Jie was speechless. This sentence, which came out of nowhere, did indeed stun him. "Yes, I know that she's quite good. What about you? How do you feel about her?" Hua Jin asked again. Gong Jie's lips twitched. "What do you mean by how do I feel about her? You've always treated her as a good friend." Gong Jie pondered for a moment and then said seriously, "Rather than calling her a friend, it's better to call her a comrade." Comrade. Revolutionary friendship. Chapter 45-44. Hua Jin sat down opposite him. "I think that Alice is quite good." Gong Jie looked at him suspiciously. He didn't understand why he was suddenly telling him this. Hua Jin continued, "Alice may sound mean, but she has a sharp tongue but a soft heart." Gong Jie tapped the table lightly with his fingers. Do you have something to say? Hua Jin licked his lips. I have a feeling that you have something to say, but you're hesitating. It's like this. Hua Jin took a deep breath and said, I think that you owe her a thank you. Gong Jie was stunned. You. Do you know why Alice is infertile? Gong Jie suddenly stood up when he heard this. He grabbed his collar and frowned slightly. You know? He had always wondered why Alice would lose her ability to conceive for no reason. However, no matter how he asked Alice, Alice refused to answer. Gong Jie had also secretly investigated this matter. However, there was nothing fishy about Alice's infertility. If Alice was said to be a woman whose private life was more chaotic, then perhaps because she was too indulgent and had too many abortions, or perhaps because she hurt her body because of her promiscuity, then it would be a different story. Although Alice was very good at talking, in fact, her love and private life could be said to be a blank slate. It was impossible to say that she was infertile from birth. But, as for the reason behind it, she had never mentioned it to her brother. Hua Jin knew the reason. Gong Jie couldn't help but feel agitated. He had always been troubled by Alice's infertility. Hua Jin saw that he was so nervous and asked, Are you very concerned about her? Of course. Gong Jie became anxious and asked, Don't you know? Tell me. Because, Hua Jin gulped and asked again, Do you remember that you were infected with the plague when you carried out a mission? Didn't you get infected with the virus? Gong Jie said, Yes. Hua Jin said, At that time, in order to save you, she used her own body as an experimental specimen. Then, she planted the vaccine in her body? To be honest, I don't really understand this issue. However, I heard that he first implanted the virus into his own body and then experimented with the vaccine on her body. Fortunately, the experiment was very successful. However, because of the infection with the vaccine, the virus destroyed many of her body's skills and she also lost her ability to reproduce. Although she won't completely lose her fertility, if she takes the risk of getting pregnant, there's a 99% chance that the fetus will be deformed. Gong Jie listened silently, and his eyes became darker and darker. She did that. She actually did this for him? No wonder. Back then, when he was infected with the virus, a vaccine for the plague that swept the entire impoverished country was immediately available. He only knew that Alice was one of the main researchers for this vaccine. However, he didn't know that she was the one who took the initiative and used her own body as an experiment. After the vaccine was developed, it had to be tested before it could be used. And Alice was willing to use her own body as an experiment for him. Gong Jie immediately let go of Hua Jin's collar and supported himself on the table, somewhat unable to accept this fact. Chapter 45-45. I wanted to say it too, but, Gong Jie turned to look at her. She didn't want you to say it. This stupid woman. Gong Jie punched the table angrily. Who asked her to do this? She did it to save you. She didn't know that she would lose her fertility because of this experiment. After a pause, Hua Jin continued, but I think that if she were to go back and make a choice again, even though she knew that she would lose her fertility, I think she would still do it. Because. Gong Jie's lips curled into a smile. She likes me. You knew. If I didn't know, I wouldn't be Gong Jie. It was just that he had always pretended not to know. He had tried to make it clear, but Alice didn't confess her feelings. He didn't have the right to say that. He even felt that he had gone overboard. Alice didn't express her feelings, but he still had to reject her cruelly. Alice didn't say anything, but she probably knew that he didn't have any feelings for her. In fact, both Alice and Gong Jie were very smart. Smart people could see through each other's feelings from their words and actions. If two people liked each other but didn't confess their feelings, then they must be idiots. But two people who admired each other were probably like magnets. They didn't dare to be separated by anything. Their admiration for each other would bring them closer and closer to each other. And two people who didn't love each other, even if one of them was wishful thinking, the other would only step back and drift further and further away. Hence, Alice could tell that Gong Jie didn't like her. He had already made it very clear. How could she not know what was good for her? Hence, she didn't tell Gong Jie about this because she didn't want this to become a burden for him. Alice had always thought that if Gong Jie was destined to not be her life partner, then she would be his family. She could always protect him. Anyway, love would eventually turn into family. She didn't want to hold him back. When she found out that Gong Jie liked Hua Jin, she was really gloating. This was her little selfishness. If the man she liked didn't like her because he liked other men, then she still had a chance to comfort herself. Gong Jie sat down at the table with a serious expression. She didn't tell me because she didn't want me to be grateful to her. Yes. Hua Jin rested his chin on his hand. She doesn't want you to know, but I feel that she has the responsibility to tell you, and you have the right to know, don't you think? Thank you. After learning the truth from him, Gong Jie finally breathed a sigh of relief. When Alice finished patrolling the corridor outside the ward and returned to the room, she saw only Gong Jie in the room. She was surprised. Where is he? Where did he go? Gong Jie raised his head and looked at her deeply. Come here. Alice walked over with some hesitation. The corners of her lips twitched. Especially when she saw Gong Jie's serious expression, she felt even more uncomfortable. You. What's wrong? Gong Jie stood up and came close to her. Let me ask you, is it because of me that you lost your ability to conceive? When Alice heard this, she froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. I know everything. If Hua Jin didn't tell me about this, how long did you intend to keep it from me? Chapter 45-46. Alice didn't sound angry. Instead, she sounded powerless and helpless. She had been betrayed by Hua Jin despite trying so hard. She really didn't want Gong Jie to know about this matter. After all, this was a one-sided decision that she had made. Gong Jie wasn't responsible for it. Shouldn't I know the cause and effect of this matter? Gong Jie didn't think much of it. Why did you do that? I don't know. I just did it subconsciously. Alice said, at that time, it was also a spur of the moment. So, I want to hear the truth. Because, Alice shrugged and said in a very relaxed tone, because I like you. I like you so much that as long as you're alive, I'm willing to pay any price. She was such a simple-minded person. Liking someone probably meant that she wanted him to be good. Actually, this wasn't selflessness. It was just purely, she wanted him to be good. That was all. Alice hurriedly said, I didn't mean to hide it from you. I just didn't want to burden you and make you feel guilty because of this matter. Gong Jie said angrily, do you think I'm worried about you? Or do you think I'll blame myself and feel guilty towards you because of this matter? You won't. Of course not. Alice actually heaved a sigh of relief. That's good then. It's not a big deal anyway. She was finally able to put down the huge rock in her heart. She was really relieved to hear that from her brother. Gong Jie looked at her relieved expression and, for some reason, felt tears welling up in his eyes. Earlier on, he had just said those words out of anger. However, he didn't expect that Alice's relieved expression would make him feel bad. Gong Jie took a deep breath and said, this kind of thing can't happen again. Okay. I also hope that there won't be a next time. Although it's not a big deal, it still took half of my life. Gong Jie finally couldn't hold it in anymore. His heart ached so much that he pulled Alice into his embrace. His throat was already slightly hoarse. You should have told me about this earlier. Alice noticed that his shoulders were trembling slightly, and she couldn't bear to see him like this. If I had known that Hua Jin's mouth wouldn't be reliable. Forget it. I had originally planned to keep this matter from you even if I were to die. But since you already know. Spilled water could not be retrieved. Alice rubbed the back of his head helplessly. Gong Jie, you still blame yourself for this, right? Gong Jie did not say anything. Alice asked again, do you know why I never told you? Gong Jie was still speechless. Because. Alice said faintly, I don't want you to treat me as your benefactor and feel grateful and guilty towards me. You should have told me. What's the point of telling you? Alice shrugged. Don't tell me that if I told you, my body would return to how it used to be. Or would I let you live the rest of your life with gratitude and guilt towards me? There's no need for that. It's not worth it. It's worth it. His lips curled into a smile. At the very least, I'll know who saved my life. Wow, after hearing that, Shouldn't I be a little touched? But Alice finally couldn't help but say, is this the only time I saved you? Gong Jie was speechless. Previously, I saved you so many times, but you didn't seem to thank me much. Chapter 45-47. That's different. Alright, I got it. Alice sighed helplessly. If you really want to thank me, please try your best to make yourself happier. Gong Jie was stunned. Do you think I'm selfless? Alice snorted mischievously. Of course not. I just hope that you can be happier. At least, you can live a peaceful life. Be happy with Hua Jin. Love life. Love life. At least, don't let me down for saving your life time and time again. When Gong Jie heard this, he suddenly laughed helplessly. Finally, he let out a breath that was stuck in his throat. Yes, I will. That's good. Alice asked again, is there anything else? Gong Jie looked at her silently. Alice really couldn't stand his deep gaze. She felt awkward and inexplicably sad. She hurriedly said, if there's nothing else, I'm leaving. With that, she turned around and left the room as if she was fleeing. Until she was far away from the room and in the corridor, she leaned against the wall and heaved a sigh of relief. Unknowingly, her eyes turned red. If she could be more selfish, when Gong Jie questioned her about this matter, she would definitely take the opportunity to confess to him. She would say, Gong Jie, I like you. I love you. It's because I love you so much that I risked everything to save you, even if I had to sacrifice my fertility. Or rather, Gong Jie, since I sacrificed so much to save you, are you going to be responsible for me? She could totally use this matter to ask for a reward. However, she couldn't seem to do it. She couldn't open her mouth. As a doctor, she couldn't make any mistakes during surgery. Even the slightest mistake in the details could lead to unpredictable consequences. It was the same for love. If there was less love, it wouldn't be called love. If it was one-sided love, it wouldn't be called love. She might as well fulfill it. In fact, words like I'd rather Gong Jie like a man than a woman were all against her heart. They were just said for Hua Jin to hear. But in reality, she knew better than anyone that Gong Jie liked Hua Jin only because Hua Jin happened to be a man. He did not only like men. She couldn't possibly ask Gong Jie to reciprocate her love just because she had sacrificed so much. Being good to a person is voluntary. Similarly, loving a person is voluntary. However, just now, when she said I really love you, he almost said it out loud. Alice tightly covered her mouth. For the first time in her life, the urge to cry overcame her reason, and tears suddenly gushed out of her eyes. Hua Jin happened to pass by and vaguely saw Alice leaning against the wall, covering her mouth and biting her knuckles as if she was crying. He walked over worriedly, but when he got closer, he realized that Alice was really crying. What's wrong? Hearing Hua Jin's voice, Alice raised her head and glared at him fiercely. She sobbed and said, Hua Jin, you betrayed me. Huh? Why did you tell Gong Jie about that? Alice said angrily, Gong Jie knew about this and came looking for me. I was the one who told him. Hua Jin had a matter-of-fact look on his face. I think he should know about this. He has the right to know. Why can't you tell him? Traitor. Alice was angry when she saw him. Chapter 45-48. Hua Jin said, you can say whatever you want. Anyway, I think Gong Jie has the right to know about this. What about you? Alice suddenly became aggressive. Do you like Gong Jie? Hua Jin suddenly didn't know how to reply. He turned his face away awkwardly. Why are you asking this question? Hua Jin, do you know that sometimes I really want to beat you up? You obviously like Gong Jie too, don't you? Hua Jin immediately retorted, when did I? If you don't like him, why did you take such a big risk and come all the way to East Africa to look for him? If you don't like him, why do you blush every time you see Gong Jie? If you don't like him, why can't you sleep well the whole night because you're worried? Who's here for him? Hua Jin felt wronged. I just want to experience what it's like to be a mercenary on a mission. Alice couldn't help but sneer. So how long are you going to say one thing and mean another? How am I saying one thing and mean another? If you continue to say one thing and mean another, I'll really beat you up. Alice said angrily. The one who's favored is indeed fearless. Have you ever considered my feelings? You clearly know that Gongjie likes you, and you like Gongjie too. Why can't you just admit it? Is your reputation so precious? Gongjie can put down his status as the young master of the Gong family to confess his feelings to you. Why don't you admit your feelings? Is it really that difficult for you to admit that you like Gongjie? With that, Alice curled her lips in self-mockery. Do you know how envious I am of you? You have to know that it's not easy for two people to like each other. Most people, the person they like doesn't like them, and the person they like doesn't like them. They always miss out on love. What about you? Don't wait until you really miss out on love and regret it. What about you? Hua Jin said angrily, aren't you the same? Don't you like Gongjie? Why didn't you say a word or tell him? Don't tell me you're just going to watch him pass by. Because he already knows everything. Whether I say it or not, the effect will be the same. Hua Jin said angrily, how would you know if you don't try? What if he likes you a little? There's no need for that. It's different. Even if he knows about it, you didn't tell him about it in front of him. At least, tell him about your feelings. Alice suddenly turned her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes. You want me to confess in front of him and be rejected once? That's not what I meant. Or do you want me to beg for his mercy in front of him? Hua Jin was at a loss for words. I didn't. Alice almost exhausted all her strength. It's not a big deal. As long as you work hard, it will be useful. If she didn't like him, she didn't like him. If she didn't love him, she didn't love him. Although no matter what, one had to try their best and struggle a little to know whether there was hope or not, Chu Yunsheng was still in a daze. But this was the only thing that Alice didn't want to struggle with. Her greatest gentleness was not to disturb or force him. Chapter 45-49. Hua Jin looked at Alice in a daze and was silent for a long time. Alice asked, life is so short. Isn't it a blissful thing to be able to be with someone you like and who likes you back? At the hospital. Yun Shusha sat on the balcony. After drying the clothes, she leaned against the balcony in a daze. Mu Yaja walked over and hugged her waist from behind, gently resting his head on her shoulder. What's wrong? What's on your mind? I'm thinking, when will the vaccine be available? Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh. It's not like you're just thinking about it. The vaccine will be available for clinical use tomorrow. But I'm still praying silently in my heart. Who are you praying to? Jesus? Or Buddha? Mu Yaja paused and said, as the saying goes, if you're sincere, it'll happen. If you're not sincere, how can God hear your prayers? Mu Yaja gently stroked her hair. All right, don't think so much. I'm worried, just like you. But worrying is useless. Yun Shusha was still absent-minded. Mu Yaja kissed her cheek and hugged her gently. Tomorrow is your birthday. Ah, Yun Shusha finally reacted. My birthday? You were so busy taking care of the little guys that you forgot about your birthday? Yun Shusha said, how can I be in the mood to celebrate my birthday at this critical juncture? We still have to celebrate your birthday. We don't want to build our happiness on Xiao Chen's suffering. Instead, we have to persevere in the face of adversity and hope for life. Mu Yaja continued, besides, your birthday is very meaningful. When the time comes, we'll bake a cake and send it to Xiao Chen. Although he can't be by your side this year, we have to tell him that we hope that he can be there for your birthday next year, the year after that, and every year after that. Yes. Yun Shusha nodded. Unknowingly, her face was wet with tears. After returning home from the hospital, because she had not been home for a long time, the whole house was filled with a sense of loneliness. He hadn't come back for a long time, so much so that there wasn't even the slightest trace of life left. Yun Shusha hurriedly turned on the lights in all the rooms. The bright light finally brought a trace of vitality to the cold and cheerless home. After Mu Yaja parked the car, he walked into the house. Looking at the lights in the house, he finally felt a trace of warmth. Usually, he had 3 points and 1 line. Hospital, company, home. Usually, Yun Shusha would be at the hospital. Usually, when he came back from the company, he only used the bedroom. When Yun Shusha was not at home, His 3 meals a day were basically settled in the company cafeteria. Both Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun were a little surprised. Why had boss been going to the company cafeteria every day recently? Isn't sister-in-law cooking at home? Looking at Mu Yaja's depressed expression, could it be that the two of them had quarreled? That's impossible. They are clearly very loving and respectful to each other. They could vaguely tell that Mu Yaja had been preoccupied with a lot of things recently. He was a little absent-minded when it came to company matters. However, Mu Yaja didn't say anything to them. They didn't dare to ask too much. In front of Yun Shusha, he was her husband. In front of Yo-Yo, Yu Yaro, and Xiao Chen, he was a father. It was only in the company that he was a man of flesh and blood. Chapter 4550. He was also afraid. Guilt seemed to be the last straw, and it was about to crush him. When he thought back to Xiao Chen's childhood, he realized that he was not a good father. He did not care for others, nor did he love others. It was only after he got together with Yun Shusha that he learned how to care for and love children. Thanks to Yu Yaro, he was finally promoted to a qualified stay-at-home father. As for Xiao Chen's childhood, he could no longer make up for it. Xiao Chen was very strong-willed. He was never willing to say anything, but it could be seen that Xiao Chen was very envious of both Yo-Yo and Yu Yao. It was the kind of envy that came from deep within his bones. However, he had always been so sensible. He was so sensible that it made one's heart ache. With such a pity, Mu Yaja was worried that he would never have the chance to make up for Xiao Chen. At night, negative emotions came and went as one wished. He had not had a good night's sleep for a long time. Now that he was home, he finally felt a trace of the warmth of home. It more or less dispelled some of the loneliness in his heart. He sat on the sofa and looked in the direction of the living room. He listened to the sound of Yun Shusha beating eggs and mixing flour. Yun Shusha did not feel very uncomfortable about the cake. However, she had been practicing her baking skills with Yo-Yo. She had also improved a little after killing so many people. After a while, she finished mixing the dough and made a cake embryo. Then, she put it into the oven. An hour later, the cake embryo was taken out. During this time, Yun Shusha had already prepared the condensed milk, mousse, chocolate, Oreo, cookies, and other ingredients. She smoothed the condensed milk and mousse bit by bit. When the final cake was out of the oven, Yun Shusha looked at the cake that was pretending to be perfect and called Mu Yaja over happily. Mu Yaja walked over and looked at the cake. He was very satisfied. Although my skills have deteriorated a little, it's still considered exquisite. I haven't made it in a long time. I'm indeed a little rusty. Yun Shusha dipped the remaining mousse on her finger and brought it to Mu Yaja's mouth. Here, try it. Mu Yaja took a bite and licked it. He raised his eyebrows in satisfaction. The taste is not bad. Right. Yun Shusha was very pleased. At least this proves that you haven't regressed too much. Where's the packaging? Here. The two of them sealed the cake in a box and put it in the fridge. At night, he would not go to the hospital. Jiyu Jinglian and Chu Ho stayed behind to take care of her, while Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja came back to rest for a while. The two families reached an agreement. Taking turns to keep watch at night, this way, the pressure on the various families would lessen. Although people could rest in the hospital, they were provided with foldable single beds, which were not comfortable to sleep on. If they did not sleep well, it would affect their condition in all aspects. This was especially true during company meetings. There were several times when Mu Yaja dozed off in front of several employees. Lu Jinyu and Jiang Shun were dumbfounded. When they got home, they took a comfortable hot bath. The two of them hugged each other and lay on the bed, feeling extremely comfortable. After so many days of stressful life, they finally relaxed a little at this moment. Yun Shusha lay on Mu Yaja's chest and asked worriedly, "Will Xiao Chen really be safe?" Mu Yaja opened his eyes. Actually, he was not sure about this, but, I believe that my son is blessed by the heavens. He will definitely be fine. Chapter 4551. As she spoke, Yun Shusha laughed self-deprecatingly. People only realize how precious that person is when they are on the verge of losing them. Thinking back, Xiao Chen has always been very sensible. That day when he was critically ill, I was waiting outside the door and kept thinking about it. I feel like I owe him too much. In the future, there will be plenty of opportunities to make it up to him. I'm just afraid that there won't be any more opportunities. Don't say such things that destroy the morale of our own people. Mu Yaja paused for a moment and immediately comforted her. The vaccine has already been developed. Don't think too much. Don't let your imagination run wild. Go to bed early. Okay. Yun Shusha closed her eyes and lay on his chest. It was rare for her to sleep so peacefully. The next day, the sun was shining brightly. The gloomy weather for a few days finally came to an end. The sun was shining brightly and the weather was good. Yun Shusha woke up and drew the curtains. Receiving such warm sunlight, the gloominess in her heart finally dissipated a little. Yun Shusha woke up early in the morning and was busy in the kitchen. Besides the cake, she also had to prepare some dishes. Mu Yaja applied for leave and brought the cake to the hospital with Yun Shusha. Jiyu Jinglian and Chu Ho were a little confused when they saw that they came with a cake. Whose birthday is it? Yo-Yo immediately said, Mommy's birthday. I remember. Yu Yaro was also beaming with joy. The atmosphere in the hospital was always oppressive. It was rare that Yun Shusha's birthday happened, so it seemed to add some joy. Since we're in the hospital this year, we won't hold a grand birthday party. Yun Shusha placed the cake on the table and placed the dishes one by one on the table. Chu Ho was very happy. It would be even better if there was wine. Let's drink a few glasses. Mu Yaja raised his eyebrows. There is. He took out a bottle of champagne from his handbag and even brought a wine glass with him. Even if they were in the hospital, the ceremony of a birthday celebration could not be lacking. Yu Yaro lay on the table, drooling as she stared at the cake. Suddenly, she asked, then, what about Xiao Chen? Can he eat a birthday cake? Cut him a slice first, and when we're done eating, send this slice of cake to the quarantine zone. Oh. Yueyao's eyelashes drooped in disappointment. Yun Shusha immediately guessed what he was thinking. He squatted down and gently scratched her nose. Yu Yao, that won't do. If the cake is sent in, we can't eat it. The quarantine area is a sterile area. There are a lot of bacteria outside, so my brother can't come out to celebrate his birthday with us. Yu Yao said, then I'll eat less and leave more for my brother. Yu Yao, be good. You don't have to keep it. The cake is very big. I can't eat too much now. Otherwise, I won't be able to do it if I vomit it out. If he vomited, the blood would flow back into the trachea, which could easily endanger his life. Therefore, he had to rely on liquid food for now. He could only eat a little of the cake. A few mouthfuls would be bad enough. Yu Yaro nodded sensibly. Then I'll wish Mommy a happy birthday on behalf of my brother. Yun Shusha was so touched that she kissed her. Yo-Yo walked over and gave Yun Shusha a big hug. Mommy, happy birthday. I wish that you'll always be 18. Thank you, Yo-Yo. Yun Shusha kissed Yo-Yo. Jiyu Jinglian and Chu Ho gave their blessings one by one. Because of this accident, the relationship between the two families became much better than before. Especially Mu Yaja and Jiyu Jinglian, who even knew how to tease each other. Chapter 45-52. Chu Ho inserted candles into the cake. The candles were shaped like numbers, and Jiyu Jinglian drew the curtains in the ward. The moment he lit the candles, the faint light reflected on Yun Shusha's face, and her gaze was gentle. Chu Ho said, Shusha, hurry up and make a wish. Okay. She had already thought of the wish countless times. Yun Shusha closed her eyes, and a strong wish surfaced in her mind. She wished that Xiao Chen would not miss her birthday again. This wish did not ask for much, but could it come true? Yun Shusha made the wish sincerely and gently blew out the candles. Chu Ho passed the knife to her. Yun Shusha cut a piece of cake and put it aside. This piece was for Xiao Chen. She also cut another piece and put it together with Xiao Chen. Chu Ho was a little surprised. Who is this for? Have you forgotten? And your Xiao Bao? Not a single one of them can be missing. Chu Ho came back to his senses. So you haven't forgotten about Xiao Bao. He had originally thought that Yun Shusha had probably forgotten about Xiao Chen because she had been thinking about Xiao Bao. Chu Ho had originally felt that it was a pity that Xiao Bao would not be able to eat the cake because he was also in the quarantine zone. He had not expected that Yun Shusha would still be thinking about him. This is for Xiao Ichen and Xiao Bao. Later, after we finish eating, we'll send the cake to them. Okay. We can't forget about them. After dividing the cake evenly, Yo-Yo took a portion for Yu Yaro and another for Jing Yang. The little guy was eating with relish. Although cake was not a rare thing, and the little lads had been living in good conditions since they were young, they were sick of eating all kinds of cakes. However, in such an environment, staying in the hospital for so many years, they had to eat nutritious meals. It was rare to have cake in such a boring diet, so it was considered a novelty. Yo-Yo even felt that this cake was the best thing he had ever eaten in the world. Yo-Yo raised the cake and asked, "Mommy, did you make this cake?" "Yes." "Wow." Yo-Yo looked at her with admiration. "This cake is probably the best thing I've eaten since I came to this world." Yun Shusha, Mu Yaja could not help but say, "Is it? I feel that my cooking skills haven't changed. You've been eating nutritious meals in the hospital all this time. It's a rare occasion you get to eat cake, so you think it's delicious." Upon hearing this, Yo-Yo thought about it for a while. Then, he complained to Yun Shusha, "Mommy, Daddy said that your cake tastes awful." Mu Yaja resisted the urge to hit him. "Did I say that? You're trying to drive a wedge between us." "That's right," Yo-Yo said eloquently. "I said that Mommy's cake is delicious, but Daddy said that I've been eating too much nutritious meals in the hospital and that's why I've lost my sense of taste." Yun Shusha looked at Mu Yaja meaningfully. Mu Yaja explained, "That's not what I meant. But it sounds like that to me." Chu Ho's tone was as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. Mu Yaja opened his mouth but could not say a word. Jiyu Jinglian also nodded seriously. "Don't explain. Any explanation is a cover-up." As Yu Yaro ate the cake, Mu Sai's mouth was full, but he still nagged, "If Daddy doesn't like Mommy's cake, then Daddy shouldn't eat it." Chapter 45-53. Yu Yaro was not angry. Instead, she enjoyed Mu Yaja feeding her personally. Yo-Yo was amused by Yu Yaro. "Haha, it's best that Daddy doesn't eat. This way, Yu Yaro can eat more, right?" Yu Yaro finished a piece of cake in the blink of an eye. Then, she turned to look at Mu Yaja and opened her mouth wide again. Everyone couldn't help but think of a baby bird waiting to be fed. They straightened their necks and opened their mouths wide, waiting for their mother to feed them. Mu Yaja patiently fed her a small piece of cake. Delicious, Yu Yaro happily swayed her head from side to side as she ate the delicious cake. When everyone saw this, they couldn't help but smile. Jiyu Jinglian's eyes were fixed on her. Chu Ho saw him staring blankly and couldn't help but nudge him on the shoulder. "Why are you staring at someone else's daughter?" Mu Yaja was shocked when he heard this. He quickly shielded his precious Yu Yaro and looked at Jiyu Jinglian warily. "What are you doing?" Jiyu Jinglian was caught red-handed and turned his handsome face away awkwardly. Chu Ho laughed. "I think someone is envious. Envious of having a little princess." Yun Shusha was surprised. "Hey, didn't you have twins?" "Jinglian, where's your Qianqian?" At the mention of Qianqian, Jiyu Jinglian's usually arrogant face was filled with disappointment. Chu Ho laughed even harder when he heard this. "Qianqian is not close to him." "Not close?" Yun Shusha looked at Jiyu Jinglian, who was secretly sulking, in surprise. She then turned to look at the father and daughter, who were snuggling happily in Mu Yaja's arms. She could not believe it. This daughter must be the closest to her father. As soon as she said this, the atmosphere in Jiyu Jinglian's corner became even gloomier. He took a bite of the cake and said nothing. Chu Ho said helplessly, "Logically speaking, that's what they said. However, Qianqian has also grown up a lot. She can call her mother, brother, and Uncle Fu. She can recognize everyone except for Jing Lian. She cries for me to carry her as if Jing Lian is a demon king." Yun Shusha's mouth twitched when she heard that. Wasn't that right? Wasn't Jiyu Jinglian the great demon king himself? Could it be that his killing intent was too strong? After all, in the past, a simple stomp of the Jiyu family's feet could cause a bloodbath. Jiyu Jinglian was ruthless. It was said that the more powerful a person was, the more murderous he would be. Children, on the other hand, were very intelligent. Normally, when they saw someone with a strong murderous aura, they would cry out of instinct. No wonder Qianqian was no longer close to Jiyu Jinglian. Yun Shusha only comforted her. Jinglian, it's okay. The child is still young. When he grows up, he'll naturally be closer to you. Jiyu Jinglian didn't know if he should nod or sigh. He asked, was Yu Yaro close to his father since he was young? That's different. How is it different? Yu Yaro was taken care of by Yaja since he was young. At that time, I was not in good health after giving birth and he couldn't bear for me to tire myself out. He did everything personally for Yu Yaro, including breastfeeding him. When Jiyu Jinglian heard this, he said indignantly, haven't I done enough personally? Chu Ho said, did you take care of the two little guys as well as I did? I cried whenever I got close to them. I couldn't help it. This means that they're afraid of you. Haha. There's no choice. Your daughter isn't close to you. Jiyu Jinglian was furious. That might not be the case when she grows up. Maybe when she grows up, she'll still be close to me. Just like Yu Yao, she's closest to her father. Chapter 45-54. Yo-Yo proudly hugged Yue Yao's shoulders. I'm the one closest to Yu Yao. Yu Yao likes me the most, right? Yue Yao's innocent eyes darted around, and she immediately slapped her face. No. Yo-Yo was speechless. Everyone laughed. Ha 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 ha. Yo-Yo felt a little wronged. She reached out and pinched Yue Yao's face. She was angry at her heartlessness, but she couldn't bear to hit her too hard. She only asked eagerly, didn't you say that you like Big Brother the most? Not anymore. As Yu Yaro spoke, she looked at Jing Yang and said in a childish voice, I like Big Brother Yang Yang the most now. Yo-Yo looked at Jing Yang resentfully. Indeed. During her stay in the hospital, Yu Yaro and Jing Yang's relationship was the best. It was so good that it angered both humans and gods. He had been jealous more than once, but because of Xiao Chen, he had been very worried and neglected to take care of Yu Yao. Because Big Brother Yang Yang plays with me, Yu Yaro said, I like to play with Big Brother Yang Yang the most. Feeling the sharp stab in his back from Yo-Yo's angry glare, Jing Yang was so scared that he buried his head and ate the cake. He acted as if he was an outsider who didn't know anything and looked innocent. Ha 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 ha. Everyone laughed even more unbridled. No matter who it was, even Yun Shusha, it was rare to see Yo-Yo get snubbed like this. Moreover, it was at the hands of Yu Yao. However, even so, Yo-Yo still couldn't bear to be angry at Yu Yao. She looked at Jing Yang with hostility, but when her gaze returned to the back of Yue Yao's head, it was full of tenderness. He gently rubbed Yue Yao's black hair and said dotingly, anyway, no matter who Yu Yao likes the most, I will always dote on Yu Yao the most. Brother Ichen dotes on Yu Yao too. Yu Yao pouted. At the mention of Xiao Ichen, she felt a little disappointed. Yu Yao, when will you be able to see Big Brother? Yu Yao misses him so much. Although her tone was full of dejection and grievance, she did not stop eating the cake. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at Yu Yao, who was happily eating the cake but was also worried about Xiao Chen. For a moment, they didn't know whether to feel sad or laugh. Yo-Yo comforted her. Brother Ichen will recover soon. Really? Yue Yao's eyes sparkled when she heard this. She bit on her cake spoon and looked up at Yo-Yo. What about us? Are we almost done? You'll be fine if you eat more. All right. When she heard that she would be fine after eating more cake, Yu Yao ate even more happily. Yun Shusha was a little worried. Will you gain weight if you eat like this? After all, there was so much sugar and calories in the cake. Yu Yao had standard baby fat. Her face was chubby, and with a pinch, all her fingers could pinch was meat. It was soft and tender, but there was no meat on her body. Her stomach, however, would bulge like a little ball every time she finished eating. Yo-Yo hugged Yu Yao lovingly. Such a small glutinous ball even had a strong milky fragrance on her body. He had a feeling that this little sister was made of milk. She had clearly been weaned for a long time, but the milky fragrance on her body was still there. Everyone looked at each other and sighed. Only two people were missing from such a joyous and harmonious scene. The 2 cakes were carefully kept and sent to the quarantine area by the nurse. Chapter 45:55. A cake. Xiao Bao asked the nurse, "Whose birthday is it?" Mu Chen's mother. "It's her birthday today, so she said that she can't leave you guys behind." Xiao Bao was a little envious when he heard that. "How nice. We can celebrate our birthdays together." The nurse squatted by the bed and comforted him. "Eat this cake and get better quickly. Then, you can leave this place quickly." "Okay. Thank you, Auntie Nurse." When the cake was sent to Xiao Chen's ward, Xiao Chen had just finished his drip. When he saw the cake, he immediately remembered that it was Yun Shusha's birthday today. He had been isolated all this time, so he didn't know that the date outside had changed. The concept of time had been deeply blurred because he was isolated from the world. It was a little regretful. He couldn't accompany his mommy and sing her a happy birthday song on her birthday this year. When will I recover? He was really tired of this place. Xiao Ichen was vexed. Back then, when he found out that his illness had worsened, he didn't think much of it. He felt that no matter what, he would be able to turn danger into safety. He was never afraid of death. It was also because of this courage that he didn't take the flu to heart. However, he didn't expect that because of this carelessness, he would become the one with the most serious illness. He had been on the verge of death several times. Until now, it was like a nightmare. He wasn't afraid of death. He was only afraid of separation. The nurse said, "Your mommy asked me to pass on a message to you." When Xiao Chen heard that his mommy had something to tell him, he sat up excitedly. "What did mommy say to me?" She said, "Ha. I'll tell you after you finish eating the cake." Xiao Chen pouted and said coquettishly, "Nurse, tell me first. Don't bargain with me. This is a cake that your mommy personally made." "Why? Don't you want to eat it?" "If you don't want to eat it, can you give it to me?" "No." Xiao Chen protected the cake that Yun Shusha had personally made. "Anyway, you can't eat this cake. Don't threaten me." "All right, I'll eat it. Don't eat too much. It's too sweet. It won't be good if you spit it out." "Yes." Xiao Ichen obediently picked up the spoon and took a bite of the cake. The cake was sticky, sweet, and mousse, but she didn't feel sick of it at all. Just the right amount of sweetness. It was so delicious that he wolfed it down. "Eat slowly." The nurse's heart ached as she watched him eat the cake. She couldn't help but say, "Your mommy said, she misses you a lot." Xiao Chen paused for a moment, and a teardrop fell onto the dining table. He closed his mouth tightly, trying to hold it in, but failed. He carelessly wiped the corners of his eyes. In an instant, his eyes were wet. Because he rubbed them, they were red and swollen. Against his pale skin, it made people's hearts ache. "I miss mommy too. So, you have to pull yourself together. Your mommy made a wish today, and it must be for you." Wishes couldn't be spoken out loud, otherwise, they wouldn't come true. However, everyone knew who the main character of this wish was. Yun Shusha's wish must have been for Xiao Chen. She hoped that he would get better soon. Xiao Chen finished all the cake. Actually, he didn't like to eat sweets, but because it was Yun Shusha's birthday and she had personally made the cake, he decided to eat it. Chapter 45:56. At the same time, East Africa. Due to the war, it was extremely difficult to find the only remaining shop. However, Alice managed to find it. Next to the hospital, there was a very dilapidated dessert shop. There was also a display cabinet selling cakes. However, the conditions were limited. The surface of the cake inside looked like it was smeared with very cheap cream. There were many places that had not been smoothed, and the appearance was not exquisite enough. However, it was not easy for her to find this shop in such a remote corner beside the hospital. There was probably a market further away. However, due to the conditions in East Africa and the recent invasion of war, there were refugees everywhere. Many shops that were lucky enough to escape the war had been smashed and robbed by the refugees. A cake like this was not cheap. It actually cost dozens of US dollars. Due to the war, the country's currency had been devalued. Only US dollars were allowed to circulate in the market. Alice bought the cake back. When Hua Jin saw that she had bought the cake, He found it a little strange. Where did you buy the cake from? A shop in a remote corner beside the hospital. A remote corner. He had already said that it was a remote corner, but she had still managed to find it. Alice paused and said, "Luckily, it's a remote corner, so it hasn't been robbed clean by the refugees. Many conspicuous shops beside the hospital have been robbed and closed. This place is remote, so it's still open." "Oh. It's Xiao Jie's birthday today. Have you prepared a gift?" Hua Jin frowned. "I have prepared it." "What gift?" "It's a secret." Hua Jin glanced at her coldly. "I can't tell you." "Why?" "It's not a gift for you." "Why are you so agitated?" When Alice heard this, she also asked for a snub and whistled. It must be some shameful gif. With that, she carried the cake in. In the ward, Gong Jie was leaning against the window and drinking coffee. When he saw Alice carrying the cake in, his eyes widened in shock. Previously, Alice had told her that she was going to buy him a cake. Gong Jie was worried that she might be in danger. Alice even joked that she wasn't on the wanted list. She wasn't him, so why would she be in danger? Gong Jie did not think much of it. Although Alice wasn't on the wanted list, she was still a member of the Hurricanes. Even the FBI knew her. In addition, at this time, there were ruins everywhere. Why would they go to the ruins to find a cake shop? It was simply wishful thinking. He didn't expect that she would really buy the cake back. Unbelievable. This woman was simply omnipotent. Ever since you were young, you could lack anything on your birthday except for cake. Gong Jie was surprised and touched by Alice's kindness. It was so dangerous, but she still insisted on buying him a cake. Cake wasn't a tradition of the Gong family. It was just that after he was young, when he celebrated his birthday with his elder sister, the most important ceremony was to have a cake. Gong Jie was a very ritualistic person. Every birthday, Mu Qingcheng would buy them a birthday cake. Although the cake was sometimes big and sometimes small and not enough for 3 people, it was essential to have a cake on a birthday. Chapter 45-57. When it was his birthday, Gong Jie was inexplicably unhappy when he saw that there was no cake. He kept feeling that something was missing. It was as if without the cake, he felt that the birthday was missing a little bit. Every time he saw the cake, he would think of Mu Qingcheng and Yun Shusha. In this way, even if it was his birthday alone, he wouldn't feel lonely. However, without the cake, he would feel that he was really alone on his birthday. It was also from that time that Alice really realized that on her birthday, she couldn't lack anything but cake. Otherwise, she wouldn't have tried so hard to find a cake everywhere. In the end, he really found it. Maybe the taste is limited, but I've seen the production environment. It's quite clean. Gong Jie walked to the table and opened the box personally. A cake that wasn't considered round greeted his eyes. There was nothing new about the production. In China, it was the original appearance of a cake from the 60s or 70s. The cake's cream was mixed with cheap coloring. The wavy pattern was written in English, "Happy Birthday." The font was crooked and not exquisite at all. "Happy birthday." Alice smiled at him. Gong Jie smiled and gently hugged the back of her neck. He planted a kiss between her eyebrows. "Thank you." Hua Jin said. That, Gong Jie turned to look at him. "What?" "Happy birthday to you." Gong Jie paused and suddenly thought of something. "Then, where's the gift that you prepared?" Hua Jin inexplicably looked a little guilty. "I'll give it to you later." "What gift?" "You're being so mysterious." Gong Jie didn't probe further. He casually dipped his finger in some cream and put it into his mouth. It was unexpectedly delicious. "It's so sweet." Although it was cheap coloring, the cream was actually not bad. The point was, in a background like East Africa, the food had always been bad. The cake placed here was already considered a luxury. Hua Jin also took a bite. His appetite wasn't as picky as Gong Jie's, but he felt that the cake wasn't delicious. He didn't like cream. "This year, only Hua Jin and I will celebrate your birthday with you." Alice looked at the cake again. "But we were lucky. No matter what, we still found the cake." She actually still remembered. He couldn't live without a cake on his birthday. Gong Jie was a little touched. He pursed his lips and prepared to cut the cake. Hua Jin stopped him. Aren't you going to light a candle and make a wish? Alice chimed in, yeah, make a wish. Little Jie, make a wish. I don't know what to wish for. Think about it. As Alice spoke, she took out the only candle that the boss had given her and lit it. In the dim candlelight, Gong Jie closed his eyes and made a perfunctory wish. This year's birthday wish is, Hua Jin and Alice looked at him seriously. Gong Jie said, world peace. Hua Jin, Alice was speechless. The two of them tacitly fell silent. World peace. Who was he kidding? They didn't know why, but when this wish came out of Gong Jie's mouth, it didn't sound convincing at all. Hua Jin muttered, with you around, the world won't be peaceful. Gong Jie glanced at him coldly. He casually dipped some cream in it and forced it into his mouth. Eat your cake. Chapter 45-58. He was the biggest obstacle to world peace, okay? 70% of the world's wars were caused by hurricanes. How dare he wish for world peace? When Gong Jie heard this, he glared at him fiercely. Hua Jin suddenly felt guilty and coward. He quickly raised his wine glass and toasted him. Cheers. That sincere expression of his seemed to be trying to curry favor with him. Gong Jie did not stoop to his level. Alice also poured a glass of wine and clinked it with his. Shou Jie, I'll toast to you. Okay. Unknowingly, half a round of drinking had passed. Alice and Gong Jie had good alcohol tolerance, but tonight, the two of them had finished 12 bottles of champagne. Whether it was Gong Jie or Alice, they were both a little drunk. In the end, they were no longer drinking for the sake of drinking, but for the sake of their lives. Gong Jie was still a little sober, but Alice was already beyond drunk. She pointed at Gong Jie, wanting to take advantage of the night to compete with him. Hua Jin could not help her up, so he had no choice but to contact other people. Only then did they drag Alice away. When he returned to the room, he saw Gong Jie leaning against the floor-to-ceiling window with his head leaning weakly against the window. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hua Jin walk in, but he did not move. It could be seen that he had drunk a lot, so much so that he was dizzy. His whole body was limp and weak, like a large doll lying limp by the window. Hua Jin walked over and stretched out his hand, wanting to help him to the bed. However, Gong Jie suddenly looked at him childishly, spread his hands, and pursed his lips. He actually had a hint of coquettishness. What? Where's my present? Gong Jie said eloquently, it's my birthday today, and you didn't prepare a present for me. What present do you want? I don't care, I want a present. Gong Jie began to lose his temper. If you don't give me a present, I won't remember. All right, I'll give you a present. Get up first. Hua Jin was half joking and half fawning. His strength was limited, and drunken people were always scoundrels, so he couldn't do anything to him. Thus, in desperation, Hua Jin tempted him with a birthday present. If you lie down on the bed obediently, I'll give you the birthday present I prepared. When Gong Jie heard this, he smiled meaningfully. You're lying. You didn't prepare a gift for me at all. Gong Jie was suddenly very angry. You don't even know my birthday. How is that possible? Of course I know your birthday. He always remembered Yun Shusha's birthday, and Yun Shusha's birthday was naturally Gong Jie's birthday. He wouldn't make a mistake. He had always remembered Gong Jie's birthday. I promise you, as long as you lie down on the bed, I'll give you your birthday present. When Gong Jie heard this, he really stood up obediently. With Hua Jin's support, he finally walked to the side of the bed and sat down heavily. The soft bed collapsed slightly. The moment Gong Jie lay down on the bed, he hooked his long arm around Hua Jin's neck and pulled him into his embrace. Hua Jin lifted his head from his chest and glared at him angrily. However, he saw him cupping his face and asking seriously, "Where's the present?" God knew how much he couldn't wait to see his present. Chapter 45-59. Look carefully, the gift you want is right here. With that, Hua Jin cupped the man's face in his hands and pressed his lips against the latter's. The sudden kiss made Gong Jie, whose mind was in a mess because of the alcohol, even more dizzy. Originally, he had drunk a few more bottles out of excitement that night, and his whole body was dizzy. Hua Jin's kiss had really wiped out his last bit of rationality. Hua Jin, he actually took the initiative to kiss him. Was his so-called gift referring to this kiss? Or, Gong Jie had no time to think. Almost instinctively, he flipped over and easily pinned him under his body. Pinning the man's hands to the side of the pillow, Gong Jie lowered his head and took the initiative to kiss the other aggressively. Hua Jin's breathing quickened. Only God knew how difficult it was for him to take this step. Ever since Alice said those words to him the day before, he couldn't calm down for a long time. He had always thought that Gong Jie's so-called liking for him was actually just a moment of interest. Most of the liking had nothing to do with love. It was only because of loneliness, because of the desire for warmth, because of a moment of interest. However, after the interest, one would realize that one didn't really like the other person that much. Many feelings were often just the product of loneliness. Hua Jin had always been worried that if Gong Jie knew about Alice's matter, would Gong Jie push him away and be with her because of his guilt towards Alice? However, due to a freak combination of factors, Gong Jie and Alice's attitudes the last time had already made it clear that their friendship would not change. Alice had also told him that it wasn't easy for two people to like each other. Therefore, he had to cherish it all the more. Hua Jin thought that this was why he had to take the initiative to take this step. Therefore, he used this kiss to express his determination. He liked Gong Jie. He didn't want to deny it anymore. This feeling had already existed since the first time they played dare, when their lips touched through a piece of tissue. His feelings for her were definitely not just a moment of interest. However, at that time, he didn't think much of this feeling. He didn't think it was out of love and affection, therefore, he suppressed himself again and again, but he didn't expect that unknowingly, he had already fallen deeply. Liking someone was something that couldn't be suppressed. Especially when the other party also liked him. The more he felt suppressed, the more painful it was. If Gong Jie didn't like him, it would be fine. However, Gong Jie also liked him. Since both of them liked each other, then, let's be together. Don't care about the uncertain future or whether they could walk to the end. Love was in the present. At the thought of this, Hua Jin gently hugged the back of Gong Jie's neck and responded to his kiss even more deeply. Unknowingly, half of the shirt on his body had already been taken off. Similarly, Hua Jin followed suit and removed the man's clothes. In the blink of an eye, Gong Jie's strong shoulders were exposed to the air. For some reason, Hua Jin was so nervous about what was going to happen next that his heart almost jumped out of his throat. Chapter 4560. Gong Jie suddenly lowered his head and whispered into his ear. There's something I've wanted to say to you for a long time. What? I want. Gong Jie gently lifted his chin and kissed him gently. I want you. This impulse had been brewing for a long time. Hua Jin was slightly startled. However, because of his frantic kisses, he could no longer think independently. The night was dreary. In the room, it was charming and gentle. When Hua Jin woke up again, the sky was dark as ink. Beside him, he could hear Gong Jie's heavy breathing. He drank too much. It was lucky that he did not vomit. When he wanted him, he did not know the main points and did not know how to do it. He hurt him several times. It was like the end of the war. Other than enjoyment, it was more for him to vent. To vent the emotions that he had been suppressing. His suppression, Gong Jie's suppression, in the end, turned into energy that filled his body and was injected into the other party's body. When Hua Jin opened his eyes, he felt as if his whole body was filled with cement. He was stiff and could not move. Even when he raised his hand, he felt that his arm was extremely heavy. So thirsty for water. He felt as if the blood in his body had solidified. After much effort, he finally supported his body and got up from the bed. He turned over and got off the bed. When his toes touched the ground, it was as if there was an electric current flowing through his waist. He staggered, his legs went soft, and he fell to the ground. Hiss. It was so painful. Why did it feel as if his waist had collapsed? It was sore and painful. Most importantly, his tailbone, in particular, was extremely sore. Hua Jin wanted to cry but had no tears. He supported himself on the bed and stood up with difficulty. He walked to the table but could not find water. He walked weakly to the cabinet and poured some cold water. He gulped down a few mouthfuls of water to finally relieve his thirst. He held the glass of water and walked to the window. Through the window, he looked not far away. Even though it was far away, he could vaguely see the ruins filled with smoke. Wreckage was everywhere, as if it was the scene after the apocalypse. The whole of East Africa felt like it was the end of the world. Behind him, there was the sound of Gong Jie turning over. Hua Jin turned around and saw that Gong Jie had turned over and fallen asleep again. He walked over to the bed and squatted down. The smell of alcohol from his breath immediately assaulted his nostrils. She didn't know what he was drinking. Hua Jin clearly hated the smell of alcohol, but the smell of alcohol on his body had a kind of orchid fragrance. He gently touched his face. He always felt that such a face, if placed in the past, would have been unreachable. It was within sight, but unattainable. He always felt that he and Gong Jie were people from two different worlds. Therefore, even if he liked her, even if he adored her, he would always carefully maintain a distance from her, not daring to get close. However, the more he suppressed it, the more painful it was. On the contrary, he was envious of Gong Jie. He liked someone and loved someone, and he was so open about it. He still remembered that he grabbed him by the collar and said to him, "Let's be together." There was no hesitation at all, no overcautious. There was no turning back. Hua Jin was envious of this carefree attitude. Now, he also tried to be carefree for once. The moment he poured out the feelings that he had been suppressing, his whole body felt much more relaxed. Chapter 4561. 3 days later. Yun Shusha, who had been waiting in the ward, finally received the good news. The first batch of the vaccine had been successfully tested. Xiao Chen was in the second batch of patients to receive the vaccine. She had heard the news from Chu Ho. During this period, Chu Ho had been following the news closely. Finally, after hundreds of trials, the vaccine had been successfully tested. Yun Shusha could not contain her excitement when she heard the news. Yo-Yo was also in the ward. She had just taken her medicine and was a little drowsy. When she heard Chu Ho's words, she immediately sat up in bed. "Really?" Chu Ho nodded. "Yes, it's true. I've confirmed it repeatedly. If there are no accidents, the vaccination will start tomorrow. Xiao Bao is in the first batch, and Xiao Chen is in the second batch." "Really? That's great." She held Chu Ho's hand tightly. She was so excited that her whole body was trembling. "Shusha, you can rest assured now. The doctor said that if the vaccination is successful, Xiao Chen and Xiao Bao should be able to leave the quarantine zone very soon." Yun Shusha nodded. "However, because they are in the second batch, we don't know if there are any side effects." Yun Shusha's expression became serious when she heard this. Chu Ho said anxiously, "I've done some research before. Before this, SARS, which is similar to the influenza this time, had wreaked havoc all over the world. However, after the vaccine was tested, although the patients recovered and were discharged from the hospital, because of the vaccine and the ferocity of SARS at that time, after the patients were discharged from the hospital, the side effects gradually appeared. At that time, due to the large use of hormones to suppress the disease, steroid drugs were used in large quantities for emergency treatment. The side effects of the hormones caused some of the patients' femoral head necrosis, diffuse interstitial fibrosis of the respiratory system and ischemic lesions, and necrosis of the femoral head of the motor system. Even though they were saved from the disease, they spent the rest of their lives in pain. Yo-Yo took a deep breath when she heard this. As long as he survives, everything will be fine. No matter what pain there is in the future, I will accompany him through it. At most, I'll take care of him. He paused for a moment and continued, "However, this influenza is different from SARS. I've done my research on Xiao Chen's treatment plan. I've also analyzed the ingredients of the vaccine this time. There are no harmful ingredients in it. If you really want to list the side effects, it's probably that you'll lose a lot of weight for a long period of time. You'll lose a lot of nutrients because of your body's consumption." Yu spoke with fervor and assurance as he analyzed the situation logically. Chuhi was dumbfounded when she heard this. She stared blankly at Yun Shusha and asked in disbelief, "How old is Yo-Yo?" 11 years old. Chu Ho was even more amazed. When she thought about Xiao Bao, who was about the same age as Yo-Yo, she realized that there would be no harm if there was no comparison. How did she raise a landlord's foolish son, while other people's sons were so smart? Anyway, as long as this vaccine can cure Xiao Chen, I don't care about anything else. Yo-Yo paused for a moment and said, even if his body is damaged because of the influenza, I'll take care of him for the rest of his life. Yun Shusha hugged Yo-Yo and kissed his forehead gently. Yo-Yo, good boy. Didn't you say that you've studied the ingredients and that there aren't many side effects? Chapter 4562. Yes, but it's impossible to be foolproof. Even if there are any side effects, Xiao Chen still has us. Yun Shusha was worried when she heard this. However, the vaccine was the best solution so far. Yo-Yo comforted her, Mommy, don't worry. Although this is the first batch of the vaccine, we've already done a lot of safety testing. Moreover, the vaccine has been strengthened. We've refined the best parts and removed the dangerous parts. All in all, the vaccine is quite safe. Okay, that's good. At this point, they could only take one step at a time. The vaccine had already passed the Phase I clinical trial and Xiao Bao was in the first batch to receive the vaccine. After the vaccination, after 48 hours of observation, the flu symptoms were significantly reduced. After the blood test, the virus was quickly brought under control. Xiao Chen was also in the second batch to receive the vaccine. The surprising thing was that the vaccine seemed to have an amazing effect on Xiao Chen. That night, his fever suddenly went down. From the blood test results, his symptoms were obviously recovering faster than the other patients in the same batch. Unbelievable. The doctors were all amazed. Xiao Chen was really a miraculous child. His illness worsened the fastest and he recovered the fastest after the vaccination. Moreover, after a few days of observation, the vaccine did not have any side effects on his body. The other patients had a strong reaction. Other than vomiting violently and having a high fever, some of the more serious cases even reported that they had lost their sight. 3 days after the vaccination, Xiao Bao also had a reaction. He suddenly had tinnitus. Although it recovered quickly, his immune cells plummeted. In other words, his immune system would become very weak for a period of time. The vaccine killed the bad virus and eliminated the good bacteria. In fact, the adaptability of the vaccine varied from person to person. It had to be said that Xiao Chen was the chosen one. He was one of the lucky ones. The vaccine did not react at all on him. Xiao Chen's illness was obviously more serious than Xiao Bao's, but Xiao Chen was the one who recovered the fastest. He was also one of the first people to leave the quarantine zone. That day, Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja were at the quarantine area's entrance early in the morning, wearing heavy protective suits. Xiao Chen was also wearing a thick mask as he lay on the bed. The nurse carefully moved him out of the room. Several attending physicians and vaccine clinical professors were especially excited. They personally sent him off and lit up the fireworks. The moment Xiao Chen stepped out of the quarantine zone, he sat up excitedly on his bed. He looked around as if he was anxiously looking for someone until he saw Yun Shusha in the crowd. His eyes flashed fiercely and he stretched out his arms like a spoiled child, asking for a hug from her. When Yun Shusha saw this, she recklessly rushed out of the crowd to his bedside and hugged him tightly. This hug transcended life and death. It was truly the joy of surviving a calamity. Mommy. It was rare for Xiao Chen to act like a spoiled child in front of her. Yun Shusha was inexplicably touched. He intimately rubbed against her in her arms. They had not seen each other for so long. A hug could not dispel the longing he had for her for so long. Chapter 4563. Yun Shusha couldn't bear to let go of him either. The mother and son hugged each other tightly. They wished that time would stop and stop flowing. The doctors and nurses who were standing at the side were moved. One of the professors said emotionally, Mu Chen is so capable. He was in the second batch to be vaccinated, but he was the first to leave the quarantine zone. There were adults who were infected with the flu and they were in good health. However, Xiao Chen was the first to leave the quarantine zone. It was a memorable moment. It was a historic moment. Xiao Chen was the first person in the capital to overcome the flu. Hence, The professors and doctors were celebrating excitedly. Yun Shusha couldn't take in any of it. She only knew that she could finally hug Xiao Ichen again. She had been thinking about it day and night, and finally, she wasn't disappointed. "Where's Yo-Yo?" Xiao Ichen suddenly asked in her arms. Yun Shusha wiped her tears and quietly turned to the side when she heard this. "Over there." Xiao Ichen followed Yun Shusha's gaze and saw Yo-Yo holding Mu Yaja's hand. They stood beside him and quietly looked in his direction. "Go ahead." Mu Yaja couldn't help but laugh when he saw the two little guys looking at each other. "Do you want to give Xiao Ichen a hug?" "Who wants to hug him?" Yo-Yo pouted and complained, "He made me wait for so long and he came out so late." "Who wants to hug him?" Mu Yaja smiled knowingly when he heard this. This little guy was still so duplicitous even at this moment. God knew how hard it had been for him to fall asleep last night when he found out that Xiao Ichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day. He couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard he tried. He was afraid that something unexpected would happen. Although Xiao Ichen would be able to leave the quarantine zone the next day, Yo-Yo was worried that something unexpected might happen. Perhaps, his condition would worsen overnight. He appeared to be very indifferent, but in fact, he was more anxious and impatient than anyone else. Mu Yaja had no choice but to gently push him from behind. Yo-Yo was caught off guard and stumbled a few steps back. He turned around and looked at his daddy with disdain. "Go. Give your brother a hug as a celebration for him." Yo-Yo hesitated for a moment before she turned around and walked towards Xiao Ichen. Xiao Ichen quietly watched him walk towards him. He couldn't help but reach out his hands and look at him expectantly. Yo-Yo looked at his expectant expression. For some reason, she felt a lump in her throat and her eyes turned red. She took a few steps forward and threw herself into Xiao Ichen's arms, hugging his shoulders tightly. "Xiao Ichen," Yo-Yo pretended to be calm. He gritted his teeth, but he couldn't hide his sobs. He forced out a few words. "Welcome, back, mm." Xiao Ichen was so touched that his eyes turned into crescents. Although he was smiling, tears streamed down his face. "I'm home, Yo-Yo, mm." Yo-Yo, Mu Ichen bit his lip. He couldn't hold back the second half of his sentence. "I missed you." "Did you miss me?" Yo-Yo nodded gently and said in a choked voice, "Yes, I missed you so much." How rare. Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja couldn't help but feel emotional. Yo-Yo, who had always been arrogant, had finally said "I missed you." Chapter 4564. Yun Shusha was so touched that she wiped away her tears. Because of this new lease on life, she thought that she would cherish the happiness of her family of 6 even more in the future. Wealth and power were another matter altogether. Only a healthy and safe life was the most important. Yo-Yo and Mu Ichen hugged each other tightly. The two of them turned their heads at the same time and glanced at Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja. Mu Yaja and Yun Shusha walked over and hugged Xiao Ichen and Yo-Yo gratefully. The four of them hugged each other tightly, and no one could bear to let go. In the ward, Yu Yaro held a bouquet of flowers and waited eagerly at the door. She woke up very early in the morning. Yun Shusha had already told her that Xiao Ichen would be returning to the ward this morning, and she would bring Yo-Yo to welcome him. Yu Yaro wanted to go as well, but she was too young, and her immunity was not as high as an adult's. Although the vaccine had been developed, Yu Yaro still tried her best to avoid going near the quarantine zone with her physical fitness. Hence, under Yun Shusha's repeated coaxing, Yu Yaro obediently stayed in the ward and waited eagerly for Xiao Ichen's return. Suddenly, the sound of heavy footsteps came from outside the door. Yu Yao's ears were sharp, and she immediately heard it. She walked to the door excitedly. If she were a little puppy now, her tail would be wagging excitedly. The door finally opened. Yu Yaro was about to go up to welcome him when she saw Chu Ho push the door open and walk in. When he saw Yu Yaro standing at the door like a puppy holding a bouquet of flowers, he was dumbfounded. Yu Yaro immediately wilted when she saw Chu Ho. "What? I thought Brother Ichen was back." Chu Ho didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He walked over and picked Yu Yaro up. "What's wrong, little Yu Yaro? Are you waiting for Xiao Ichen?" "Yes. Mommy said that Brother Ichen is coming back today." When Yu Yaro mentioned Xiao Ichen, Her face flushed red. She was obviously very happy. Chu Ho lovingly scratched the bridge of her nose. Sometimes, the more he looked at Yu Yaro, the more he liked her. She thought that it would be great if Qianqian could be as cute as Yu Yaro when she grew up. Yu Yaro was quite likable. She was obviously raised like a little princess, but she didn't put on the airs of a princess. Don't worry, Xiaochen will be back soon. Just as they were talking, Yun Shusha and Mu Yaja's voices came from outside the door. Sensing that her daddy and mommy were back, Yu Yaro kicked her legs and said that she wanted to come down. Just as Chu Ho put her down, Mu Yaja pushed the door open. Yu Yaro hurriedly walked over with the flowers in her hands. Suddenly, she bumped into the operating table that had just been pushed open. With a plop, she fell on her butt on the ground. Yun Shusha was shocked when she saw this. Just as she was about to walk over and carry her, she saw Yu Yaro nimbly get up from the ground. She patted the dust off her butt and walked toward Xiao Chen. Brother, Xiao Chen was lying on the bed obediently. When he heard Yue Yao's soft voice, he struggled to sit up. He had just been vaccinated and was still recovering. He was weak in all aspects, so when he sat up,